everybody, this is Purge bringing you guys the 6.87 gameplay update. Sorry, this is a bit late. I spent yesterday traveling back from the Philippines, and it took about 20 or so hours. It was like a 14-hour flight to Tokyo, and then we had a 4-hour layover, and then it was like no, it wasn't 14 hours, a 4-hour flight to Tokyo, and then like a 9-hour flight to San Fran, and then like a 1-hour flight to Ontario. So I'm back now, luckily, and gonna hop into this. So without further ado, 6.87 patch. First things first, reworked ranked all pick. Before the picking phase begins, there's a 15-second voting phase to ban heroes. Each player votes for a different hero. Afterwards, half of the heroes that were voted on will be randomly selected and banned. So this basically counts for the 10 heroes in the game. I'm actually really excited this went through. Now that it's happened, I'm sort of happy that Valve gave it some time to work things out, and they clearly did try some other things. For example, we had that week where you had to play either Captain's Draft, Random Draft, or Captain's Mode. This is going to slightly segment the communities, but I think this is overall better for player enjoyment of the patch, because if one hero is really obnoxious to play against, he's going to get banned half the game. So 10 bans go in, 5 bans come out, and not all the OP heroes will be there. And also I like that you don't guarantee ban somebody, because this means that otherwise, no matter what, Invoker would never be in a top tier game, and that probably shouldn't happen. In fact, it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be like that. At the minimum, it's going to be 50%, maximum 50. No, I'm sorry, minimum could be 0 actually, because people could just not ban, for example. But maximum, there will be no more than 50% Invokers in each game, for example, if that's the OP hero at the time. So I really like this. If people do want to play top tier meta heroes, they should go play Captain's Mode, and people should play them more often. So I think this is pretty cool. And I like that Valve gave other things a shot. They didn't work out, but here we are. Oh yeah, by the way, if you guys didn't notice, I'm on 720p for this video because I wanted to process much faster, so I did 60 FPS 720p. So should be a much smaller file size and should come out faster. Yeah, 2 people can't vote for the same hero. It displays who got voted on but not who voted. That's kind of cool. The random ban selection will choose at most 3 heroes from one specific team's votes. So it's okay. That makes sense, because otherwise it'd be unfair. If one team randomly got to pick 5 heroes, they could ban like 5 pushing heroes and then pick or anti-push heroes, then pick a push lineup. So the scannability, I haven't seen any images of what it looks like, but it's kind of like Glyph. You can target on the mini-map. It scans a 900 AoE for 8 seconds. That's actually a very long time. And it indicates whether there's enemy heroes in the area. It doesn't show vision. It doesn't say how many heroes there are, but it tells you if there are heroes there. So it probably looks like a ping on the map, something like that. It'll like ping red when there's an enemy hero there. You don't know how many there are there, but you can ping it. So for example, you could scan Roshan every 4.5 minutes, for example. It wouldn't tell you if Rosh is there, probably, but it will tell you if enemy heroes are there, so it's kind of cool. It does consider smoked units, that's pretty cool, but I could see this being used in a lot of cool ways. There's not amazing, there are some cool applications. You can do things like, probably the best one we thought of was scanning behind towers as you're pushing a tower, for example, like tier 1s especially are the big ones. So it'd be really good for that. You could also potentially use it at the start of the game if you're running high ground, for example, and you're worried about there being enemy heroes. So that's the scannability. Anybody can use it. Hopefully it's not abused much. A couple mechanics changes. Starting HP increased to 200, so everybody's got 20 more HP at level 1. Keep in mind that this used to be 150, so a total of 50 extra HP to start the game. And also, base mechanics are also changed. Every time you get a strength point, you now get 20 HP instead of 19. I kind of like this because it's a little bit easier on numbers. Overall good. Hero base mana increased from 0 to 50. I like this a lot as well. I think this is a fix to minus int heroes like OD, for example. You're always going to be able to cast some mana. So even if he drains all of your int, you're going to have minimum 50. So a lot of abilities, there's a lot of stuff that costs very little mana to cast, but guaranteed will be able to be cast now. Force staffs, things like that. Boots of Travel. No, that's 75, that won't work. But there's a couple things, there are a lot of spells that are sub 50 that you will be able to use now. I kind of like that. Mana per int reduced from 13 to 12. So overall, strength items got very slightly buffed, and int items got very slightly nerfed in terms of mana pool and in terms of HP. Now, another cool thing int does now is it also increases the spell damage you do. And at first I was like, oh, I don't want to be like League of Legends. But the number that it does is actually really reasonable. It does 1% increased damage per 16 intelligence. That means if you have 100 intelligence, it gives you 6% damage increase, which is actually lower than what Aether Lens was. So it does increase your overall damage, but it's not such a huge scale that it becomes ridiculous. And it becomes more valuable for int. It basically allows for more potential int carries, basically. I mean, on a lot of heroes, you're talking about a total of, if you're really heavy on int, You're talking at like 200 intelligence. That's a lot. So like a 12% damage increase. It's not amazing, but it's something. And right now I kind of like this. I think it's like just a good thing to have in the game. It's a small amount. It gives you an option. You don't have to go all into that build if you don't want to, and most people won't. So I think it's pretty cool. Stats hover on your hero now shows your total spell amplification, including Aetherlands. Okay, that's cool. So that you don't have to like mental math calculate it. So that's kind of good. Lane health creep upgrade increase from 10 to 12 HP. So that means they will gain more HP over time. The creeps will. I'm going to assume this slightly helps with pushing. It's every 7.5 minutes. It's actually not that much, honestly. Because over the course of like a 15, that's 2 times. 30 is 4 times. 45 is 6 times. Basically 6 times 2 is 12 HP. Really not much. Not a big deal. Although this may make a difference between whether or not a 300 damage nuke will kill a range creep at a certain time. It might hit that barrier. That's the only one that's probably significant. Tier 2 damage, towers damage now the same as Tier 3, so it's a little bit harder to push Tier 3 towers. Towers now grant an armor or to allied heroes. This one is pretty interesting. So it gives you 1 armor at Tier 1 up to 4 armor at Tier 4. I don't know if the 2 Tier 4 towers stack, but it should be a little bit easier to defend now. 1 armor is not that much though. Keep in mind that if you only take physical damage, 1 point of armor will increase your HP by 6%. So in the early game, it's a mix of nukes and right clicks. It can matter, but it's not super huge, at least at Tier 1s. It definitely will encourage people to fight more, to defend Tier 2 towers at least, because I feel like a lot of Tier 2 towers don't get defended. The ones that are defended most often are Tier 1s and Tier 3s, aka Rexes. So this armor aura may encourage slightly more fights and more defense, but it also might encourage... Yeah, I think it will encourage more defending. Well, obviously it will, because it gives you more armor, right? I think it's cool. Initial bounty rune no longer gives experience. This is kind of a nice change. I talked to Will about this a little bit. Keep in mind, I read like 80% of these patch notes, but not all of them yet. So this is kind of a second impressions. And again, I might be getting stuff wrong, but I talked to Blitz about this. He said he likes this a lot because if one mid gets a bounty rune and the other person doesn't, then when they get to the mid lane, the one that did get a bounty rune is going to hit level 2 off of 2 creeps. And when that happens, they have a huge advantage over the other guy, so they can generally pressure that. So by removing the experience, it makes the mid matchup a little bit less extreme due to the bounty rune grabs. It will still give the same gold, and he said that the mid is still going to want that because it changes how early you get your bottle by a lot. But the fact that it doesn't give experience anymore is good, and I'm going to pretty much agree with that as well. Melee hero attack range increased very slightly. It's not super slightly, it's could be significant, we'll see. Lane creep aggro duration increased, so this means whenever you attack a hero, the creeps will aggro to you for that duration. So either people are going to have to get better at canceling aggro after they accidentally lane creep aggro, or you're going to have to be better at not getting aggro in the first place, so be a little careful about that. And also lane creep aggro cooldown is increased from 2 to 2.5. So I don't really understand lane creep aggro cooldown. Does that mean I'm guessing this is like that roast trick that you could do with the ward or whatever. I think after you de-aggro, you have 2.5 seconds to not be aggroed. Is that true? I wonder if there's some abusive things you can do with like canceling aggro when you harass somebody in the off lane, for example. We'll see. Melee creep gold bounty reduced from 40 to 38. Range creeps are going to be the same though for the gold bounty. Well, that's not exactly true. I guess the gold is the same. Melee and range creep gold bounty upgrade over time increase from 1 over 2. Okay, so that's why. So it used to be 1 over time, now it's going to be 2. So it's at the laning stage, it's a little bit less, but over time it will be more. Melee creep experience reduced from 62 to 45, and the range creep went from 41 to 90. So by far, the biggest experience in lane is now the range creep. This is actually a pretty big deal for the laning stage because often the range creep is the easiest to deny from a mid perspective. So now it's really, really important that you get the last hit on the range creep because if it gets denied, you lose a large percentage of your experience. You should lose half, I believe. So that's 40 or 90 to 45, whereas before you'd only lose 20. Whereas melees, if you get those denied, it's only about 22 now or something like that. So it's a really big deal for your range creep to get denied. So basically they have the same experience is the important thing, but it's on a range. So this means if you guys get minus now, you always minus the range creep, almost always. In fact, a range creep is getting awfully close to what the experience of a neutral creep gives, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked at the numbers since the last time that neuts got changed, but a lot of them are not much higher than 90, I believe. Might be slightly wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. So if you're in lane, it might just be worth it to Midas the range creep. Only downside is that you don't really want to Midas the range creep as soon as you get to a wave, because it will 100% push it. But the experience you'll get out of it will be multiplied and be much higher than what a melee would give. Whereas in the past, melee was better than range for experience. Alright. Experience required to get to level 8 and 9 rescaled. So this means it's increased to get to level 8, but reduced to get to level 9. So it just makes it kind of even. I can't remember exactly why they adjust a lot of these numbers like this, but I think a lot of it was to help support scaling, I believe, something like that. Ethereal now blocks in-flight attack projectiles fully rather than just the ones launched before Ethereal. The example for this is impetus damage or OD, basically. If he would attack you with his orb, and then you'd use Ethereal, the Ethereal would block the physical attack, but you'd still get hit by the pure damage or the pure damage from impetus. Whereas before, this is not going to work like that anymore. I think that really needed to happen because those things were very difficult to stop. You'd have to activate. It was kind of like old Wind Run, basically. If they threw the attack, then you press Wind Run, you would still get hit. But it kind of is... It makes more sense and it's more fair that it blocks right away. Evasion now uses pseudo-random distribution. If you guys don't know what this is, basically, let's say my chance to damage block is 50%, or chance to evade is 50%, and somebody attacks me. It'll have a 50% chance of hitting. Let's say it misses. Well, the next one, when he attacks, it's going to have a 45% chance, something like that. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but this is basically how it works. 45 chance for him to miss. And then if he misses again, that's really unlucky. It's now going to have a 40% chance to miss. So basically, as streaks that shouldn't happen, there's a harder and harder chance to increase that streak. So it's very unlikely now that you'll be able to hit somebody 10 times in a row, or miss somebody 10 times in a row when they have evasion, for example. It's very, very unlikely. So that's pseudo-random distribution. The game sometimes has it for some things, sometimes doesn't have it. It's been kind of in and out, depending. It's also now calculated on impact rather than launch. That means if you range attack somebody and they walk to the high ground, that means as it's hitting them, there's a chance for it to miss. Whereas if they attack low ground before, and then they walked high ground before the projectile hits, it would never miss. Unless you had evasion or something. So, just consistency. I like these two things, these three things. Just consistency. Centaur Corsair health reduced to 350, the armor is reduced by 1, and the large Centaur camp now spawns 2 Centaur Corsairs instead of 1. This is a huge deal because this basically means magic resistance. Because now when you stack a camp, especially a Centaur camp, it's going to give 2 sets of those magic resistance auras. So stacking large camps is now kind of scary because of the fact that this that it's harder to kill these. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of this, honestly, because I felt like stacking was already pretty hard to do for a lot of heroes, and now it's even worse. Mostly what this nerfs is going to be medium camps, though. I don't know if they needed that. They've already got 1 golems, but the fact that now you can get 2 magic resistance auras on a medium camp is kind of crazy. Like, those camps are almost impossible to jungle unless you have a physical AoE hero. Roshan magic resistance is reduced, so anybody that does a lot of single target magic damage can Rosh a little bit easier. Thinking about things like Pugna, for example, you could arguably do a life drain on Roshan. I mean, he's going to bash you, so somebody else has tank for you, but it's an option. Also, the experience that he gives is increased by a lot, so it's 8,000 now instead of 7,500 at level 1, and over time it does increase by a moderate amount more. 50 per minute, let's say 30 minutes times 50. 30 times 50. So it's quite a bit more experience, actually. This is extra on top of that, so yeah, that could be potentially a level or something like this. This is going to make Roshan, again, more powerful. Does that need to happen? I don't know, maybe. Roshan experience bounty changed, and that is... Okay, that's the gold. Comfort, wait. Oh, that's HP, I'm sorry. This is HP. I thought that was experience. So it's changed to 750 plus 20 per minute. So basically, level 1 Rosh experience is way less than it used to be. Because it used to be 1789. Whereas now it's 750 plus 20 per minute. I think this is kind of good because it makes a level 1 Rosh way less effective from an experience standpoint. I don't know if it completely matters though, because a lot of times it doesn't necessarily work. So now it's going to give less experience before the 52-minute mark and more after. So this is kind of nice because what this also does is it means whatever team is stomping early, they can't just take Rosh and like continue to get an incredible advantage. It will actually cost them a lot, which means that if you're doing Rosh when you're in a trading scenario, it's less good than it used to be. So, for example, if I choose to take Roshan with my team while their team pushes a tier 1 tower, then we'll be more equalized. So I would argue this is a dire nerf because dire is more likely to Rosh and now they're less likely they won't get as much advantage out of it before 52 minutes, which is fine. After the 52-minute mark, it should be at a high level, but in the early game, the team that's going to have more advantage are either ones that win team fights or ones that are on Dire's side, and most of the time that's going to even out to just Dire advantage, so I like that. Double damage haste no longer have special rules for being dispelled by spell immunity. So does this mean they're just not dispelled by spell immunity? Oh wait. Oh, okay. That means if you have a DD or a haste and you pop BKB, it doesn't go away now, I'm guessing. Most likely is what that means. Same if your ally casts Repel on you, it won't remove those. Following buffs are now Purgeable, Nightmare, Spawn Spiderlings, Malefice, Cold Snap. I really like that these can now be purged. These two are really important. Leap, movement speed buff. But mostly these two. I kind of like... I don't know if I like the nerf to Nightmare here. I feel like Bane is obviously not very strong right now, so maybe that's a little overkill. But the Malefice Cold Snap one I really like. It's a huge nerf to them. And I kind of felt like it should have been like that before. Minor adjustments to cast range mechanics to reduce overly, it doesn't matter. Illusions now benefit from damage block. That's going to matter for a lot of agility heroes. A lot of agility heroes will buy Poor Man's Shield, and a lot of them are illusions. So if you have Manta, etc., it's not going to matter that much, but in the mid game it will. It's going to be a lot harder for weak supports to deal with illusions with a Poor Man's Shield. So pretty much always you're going to get Poor Man's Shield on heroes like PL now and Nagas Iron. Not that you didn't before, but you're still going to get it. Captain's mode has changed a little bit. I'll just summarize it for you guys, but basically the order of bans in the second ban phase. Basically what happened is second pick is not as good as first pick is. First pick is better because you get to open up with the OP hero and your opponents have to react to you, I believe, is the idea behind it. I might be slightly off. But the more important thing is that in the last picking phase, that last phase, they have to pick before you. So if you save your mid picks until the last pick, then you can guarantee that your mid counters their mid, if you need that. So not only do you get to pick first, but you also get to do the last pick, which can potentially really trick your opponent. So to change that, what they also did now is that in the second phase, your opponents get the pick priority. So it's a very small advantage going towards your opponent, which is going to slightly offset the first pick advantage. Because here's the first pick. Pick 3, you pick first. Wait. That's confusing, screw it. I'm not going to look at that anymore. They had some armor type changes. They removed the strong armor type. I don't know what that used to be. I never caught that change, but moved affected units to a soft type, which has now remained named to basic type. I don't know what that means. Roshan armor type from basic to hero. I'm going to look this up real quick. Alright, I looked it up so it's not confusing anymore. So now the only 3 types are hero, basic, and structure. Structure is just buildings and siege creeps. Means you basically take very reduced damage with the exception of against siege damage. And basic is decent. This is things like lane creeps, I believe. Heroes do hero damage, by the way. So these are the armor types, basically hero, basic, structure. These are the damage types: hero, basic, pierce, siege. Pierce is stuff like range creeps, plague wards, things like that. So if we go back here and see what changed, because he went from basic to hero, that means that Roshan basically takes much less damage from piercing. Much less. So 3 times less damage from piercing is what Roshan takes now. So that means Plague Wards and Shadow Shaman ulti, that they're way worse at killing Rosh. They do a third less damage. So that got nerfed pretty bad. In terms of going from hero damage, I guess they take the same. Let me think. Hero by hero is the same as basic. So heroes do the same damage to Roshan. Creeps do less damage. What about, is basic essentially chaos? What about like jungle creeps? Greater Treants, Spider-Eye Boar, Lycan Wolf, Spirit Bear. I'm guessing, oh, there we go, all neutral creeps. So, with that said, if something's changing to a hero type, that means they take less damage now from basic. So, it means Rosh dies slower to piercing damage now, much slower to piercing damage than it used to. It used to take 3 times. Or basically 50% more, now it takes 50% less. Also, neutral creeps do less damage to Rosh, so jungling with Chen is harder. And that also accounts for Forge Spirits and stuff. It's weaker for Forge Spirits, it's weaker for all those other heroes. I believe the Lone Druid Bear also does basic damage, by the way. I don't know if they changed it or not, but if that's the case, it also, Lone Druid can't Rosh as easily either. And Siege also does a little bit less, but that's very few things. So it's pretty important to keep your mind on in terms of damage types. So Dark Troll Summoner attack type from Pierce to Hero. They're just... This is kind of good for him. If his damage stays the same, it's amazing. Because Dark Trolls in the past did piercing. That means they'll push creeps slower now, but they'll do more to heroes. Thunderhide attack type from basic to hero as well. So Thunderhides will do a lot more damage to heroes. That was the one ancient. Dark Troll Summoner damage reduced. So the damage did get reduced to compensate for this. But it's going to hit just slightly weaker than the other neutrals. But it's still going to be pretty strong with this, actually, as a range creep. And the attack damage for Thunderhide also rescaled. These will kill neutral creeps way less fast now, I think. Piercing still exists, though. It still exists. But these... Did these do basic before? Yeah, I think it said it did. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter much. I don't know if they do less damage to towers or not. I can't remember. Because there used to be like chaos damage and shit, but I think they're reducing all that stuff. Seder Tormentor, that's the one that shoots the Hadoken. Reduced mana, which is needed. And the Stormcrafter also got reduced mana. Those needed to happen. Those heroes were too OP. So there's some map changes and stuff like that. I'm going to try to hop into the game. I think we should do that, actually. Let's hop into the game really quick and take a look at what these look like. And then we can see what everything looks like. I'll just go over each change with the map. I'm going to enable cheats. That way I can blink around if needed. Then we can load the game. So... While that loads, adjusted the position of a bottom radiant tier 2 tower in nearby trees. Move the ramp between the Dire Secret Shop and the Dire Ancients further back a bit and made it narrower. I think my eyes is going to be the easiest way that I can adjust to this.
Who calls the Crystal Maiden?
Oh my god, so many items. Don't look at those yet, guys. Alright, so first one, adjusted the position of bottom radiant tier 2 tower in the trees. Okay, so it has more wraparound. You can't really like snake around as fast. Looks like you can juke through here now. Oh, this is always going to exist. This is kind of cool. So this will be a way that you can defend now. If Dire is pushing here, you can always just hide in here. There's a lot of places to hide. You can cut out here, jump out, or you can run over here and attack from this way. So it's a bit easier for melee heroes to approach. Earthshakers, for example, can go this way. And you can't get jumped on from behind. As long as you're standing here and hitting the tower, you're going to see people coming easier. Before, you'd have to wrap all the way around and attack from here, when the tower used to be here. This is also going to be a lot easier to defend. Before, because it was so close to the cliff, that when you'd go to defend your tower, you'd basically be running up a cliff into a fight, which is bad. But now you can actually stand in this area. There's a lot more even ground, so this is going to be a much easier tower to defend. Move the ramp between the Dire Secret Shop and the Dire Ancients further back, and made it a bit narrower. I see. So now there's more space here, and it's a little bit more narrow. So you can still juke through these trees, it looks like, and hide up here, but there's a little bit more space over here. The ancient area is... Wow, there's even a path here. This is pretty cool. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Increase the width of the ramp behind the Radiant bottom tier 2 tower. Okay. Basically much easier for Radiant to defend this. Add a new ramp to the left of the bottom Dire tier 1 tower. To the left of the bottom Dire 1 tier. This is probably the one they're talking about. This is pretty good. It's going to be a little bit easier for Radiant to gank Dire offlane now. But I like that more paths are existing in the game. Because basically going anywhere in this area was already pretty difficult. But now you can go this way. So that's kind of cool. The cliff ward still does exist. But now you're not so all in standing over here. If you go past the tower on Radiant now, you can ditch left. You can ditch south. But it's a 1 pixel, or it's a 1 hero width path, so you can definitely get blocked in there. But the fact that it exists is very nice, I think. New ward spot in the middle of the Dire jungle. Ah. Well, people already placed this spot very commonly, but this will be the new spot most likely. I think the purpose of this was that it's too easy to raid ward Radiant. This is one of the most common spots. You can put one over here, you can put one over here, you can put one over here. There's a lot of really good ward spots on the Radiant, which makes it harder for Dire, or harder for Radiant to defend their own jungle. So now by this ward existing, it'll be a little bit harder for Dire to defend their own jungle. But this is a pretty good ward. It'll spot a lot of stuff. I could see supports placing this in the early game, for example, to spot Dire rotations. This would actually be a really good ward for spotting Dire rotations, because supports coming from the top lane are always going to go through the jungle most likely. And this one will actually spot every single ward. Or every single movement. Really good ward here. I guess you could have done the same with a ward here. You'd spot people here or going this way. So, kind of cool. Added the adjusted spawn box to the rightmost radiant camp near the safe lane. Rightmost radiant hard camp near the safe lane. This one. Is it different? It looks like there's more space up here, but I'm not 100%. Is it really that different? I don't know. It looks about the same. Tier 3 towers and racks moves very slightly back away from the ramp. Yeah, I can definitely see it. There's a lot more space here. Should make it a little bit easier to go high ground. I can definitely see it. It looks a little different. This one looks about the same from my perspective, but it definitely looks a little bit farther back. This one in the middle looks about the same, but this one I can definitely see it. Looks a little bit different. So it should be a bit easier to go high ground with this, because as soon as you go high ground, you're hitting the tower kind of. Used to be like right here, I think. So now you have a little bit more space to spread out. Where was I? I should really highlight these. Adjusted the juke path in the clump of trees to the left of the dire tier 1 mid tower in the area closest to the ramp. The juke path in the clump of trees to the left of the dire tier 1 mid tower in the area closest. Okay, must mean over here. Okay, so there's a little bit more space in here, I guess. Added a small hiding spot to the trees to the top left of the radiant medium camp near the middle. To the top left of the radiant middle camp. I assume it's this one. Oh, it's radiant, shit. In here, I'm guessing. I don't know if you can. Let's go find out.
Here I come.
Oh shit.
Indeed.
Well, it's not there. I mean, this has actually been in here already. Most people don't know about this one. I am not entirely sure what it's referring to.
Let's go.
What exactly does it mean?
Into the breach.
Hide in here? I don't know what that means. Small hiding spot. You know,
Forward.
I think I may just stop looking at these. This feels like a waste of time. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pause this game. I'm gonna alt tab. You're going to hear nice nighttime sounds, and we're going to resume the game. Although I should probably limit audio, because otherwise it's going to like do audio things all the time. And it'll be like, hey, your tower's under attack, and I'll be like, I don't really care. We'll look on this stuff maybe later, but for now it just seems like some small to moderate changes. All right, new items: Bloodthorn, new item form from Orchid, Crystallis, and a recipe. It's pretty expensive, about 7,200, as Orchid is 4K, Crystallis is 2,000, and a 1K recipe. So it's basically like an Orchid with some damage, gives you mana regen, and all attacks on the silent target, including from allies, gain True Strike and a 1.35 times critical hit. So, and it also silences like Orchid and does amp damage. So this basically means it's a item that counters evasion heroes. This is basically a better version of a damaging Silver Edge, especially for int-based carries. They can go Orchid into this item, guaranteed, because it will give them True Strike. And it gives you a 35% right-click damage bonus, which is pretty amazing. This item looks real cool. I think heroes like Clop could definitely go for something like this. Heroes like Invoker could definitely go for this. There's a lot of Orchid heroes that can't transition the item very well, and it's going to work right now. Clinks could definitely go back to Orchid consistently now with this item, I think, because it will give you benefit. Obviously, you can still probably remove it with things like Manta Style, Diffusal Blade, BKB, but it does provide crit even if the silence does go away later, which is kind of nice. The only downside is it doesn't have passive crits on it, so it actually is kind of a weak damage item for Clinks. It's only, 60 damage for 7k gold. It might not actually be worth it for him to buy, but for a hero like Queen of Pain, might definitely be worth it. Kind of like the item, that's pretty cool. Cooldown's 11 seconds, by the way, and it should last for 5, so it's got a huge uptime, especially with an Octarine core. It'd probably be like 8 seconds. This item is going to be really good on int heroes in the really late game. Oh, it does actually, I'm sorry, it does give you Crystallis. Okay, same passive. I didn't realize this was on there, but that makes it better. You could still justify this on a Clinks, I think. Definitely Quap though. Definitely a Quap option. Doesn't give any HP and is very expensive and doesn't give you much in terms of stats. The active is pretty much all of the value, but it's a very good item. Echo Saber formed from Oblivion Staff, the thing that goes into Old Refresher, now it goes into Orchid, and an Ogre Club. I don't know if it's disassembleable. That's hard to say. 10 strength, 10 strength, 10 int, 10 attack speed, 15 damage, and 75% mana regen. So this is basically Oblivion Staff. This is actually almost entirely Oblivion Staff. It might be slightly different, but it's pretty much what an Oblivion Staff does, plus the Ogre Club. And what it does is it gives you a passive where you get to attack twice in quick succession, which I'm guessing is like Geminate. Your double attack applies a 0.6 second, 100% slow, and has a 5-second cooldown. And it only works on melee heroes. So this reminds me of when I played the One Punch Treant game where I was basically Treant with Sven Cleave and God's Strength. Like I was basically a Sven with Geminate, and it felt really good. At the very least, for gank heroes, this could be really effective. I mean, it's kind of an expensive item that doesn't actually give you much impact, and it's very int based. It gives you mana regen and int. That's useful on a lot of heroes, but it's still a really expensive item for what it does. I think 2650. The fact that it applies a slow is kind of nice. It does apply attack speed slow as well, but it's not very long. I kind of feel like this looks kind of OP at first glance, but it's still really expensive. I think it might be worth getting on heroes like Sven, perhaps, because they do hit so individually hard, but I'm not completely sold on it yet. If a hero has limited amounts of time to do damage, which is a lot of cases what Sven is like, then it might be worth getting. But still, 2650 is a lot of gold for what it does, I think. I'm not sure this is going to be playable just yet, but for any kind of crit hero, it could be really good. For crit heroes, it might be worth it. Perhaps like a hero like Jug. It's still so expensive. You could buy so much with that. I'm not sold on it. Blightstone costs 300 gold, reduces armor by 2 on attack like a Desolator. And now it's instead of a recipe for Desolator and Medallion, and now this is a new item. This may be purchasable by a couple heroes in the early game. I could maybe see a hero like Dazzle picking it up early. That'd be kind of cool because he already does a decent amount of physical damage. That's definitely an option. But and there's other heroes like Clinks, for example, that could pick it up early if they really want to. But I like this inclusion in the game. I'm guessing it doesn't stack, but I'm not 100%. And it doesn't say it's an attack modifier either, so you can pretty much buy this whenever. I'm guessing you can't get multiple. Infused Raindrops, 225 gold. Provides 0.85 mana regen, and it has a passive. Comes with 5 charges. It's destroyed when it reaches 0 charges. When you receive over 50 magic damage, it procs, consuming a charge and blocking 120 magic damage, and it has a 4-second cooldown on this. And it becomes available for purchase at the 3-minute mark. Because otherwise people would buy this at the start of the game, and it would give like a ridiculous amount of mana regen. So 0.85 mana regen, that's better than Basilius. Basilius is 0.65, and it's very expensive at 225 gold. But I could potentially see this get purchased against some heroes. You could maybe see it on mid heroes, I think, because mid heroes are not likely to take a ton of magic damage. And it will give them like so much mana in the early laning stage that it could be worth it. Like 0.85 mana, that's a lot. If we talk about how much that is over the course of what, let's say 3 minutes. Say, oops. Oh wait, that's the number I wanted. 3 times 60. That's 180 seconds for 3 minutes. Well, times it by 0.85. So over 3 minutes, you're getting 153 mana. That's bad because a Clarity Potion gives you 175 for 50. So it's kind of a bad item. It's probably going to be a bad item. The gold cost is just way too high. The gold cost is mostly going towards this damage block thing, which seems cool. Especially if you talk about the course of one team fight. If you can block all of this and you're trading 225 gold for a temporary, and your gold is gone once it's gone. 5 times that. That's 600 magic damage. That's a pretty big shield. There's maybe some cases where this is worth it. Maybe if you're worried. Like, for example, I think where this might be most useful is if you're playing a 1v1 matchup that you're worried about because you know they have an advantage over you. If you buy something like an Infused Raindrop, or you fly it in as you go on your opponent and they're not expecting you to have it, then all of a sudden you block 120 magic damage and you can kill them as a result. And if anything, you could block it twice. 4 seconds is long enough that you can definitely proc it twice in 1v1 skirmish, which would block 240 magic damage, which is the whole nuke. So I think against some heroes that are good at being aggressive, this is going to be a really good item to pick up sometimes. So you could potentially just buy the item, fly it out to you with your treads, and immediately go on your opponent and kill them because they don't see it coming. So checking items is going to be way more important because of this item. It's actually huge for that, because now everybody's calculations are going to be off. So I think that's where it's mostly going to be used, is in 1v1s, because if you get a 1v1 win out of it, it can be really big. But the problem is that if the item doesn't do anything and you waste all the charges, then you have wasted 225 gold. It's a lot of gold, but there may be some cases where this gets used. Windlace, new item, 225 gold, provides 20 movement speed. It's used in the drums and the Yules. So this could be purchased by supports in the early game. 20 movement speed is pretty good. With that same vein, you could just get Tranquils instead, so I'm not sure if it's really worth getting if you don't have drums and Yules. But it is available in the side shop, so there will be some supports buying it in the laning stage, most likely, especially if they are building drums. I don't think they would buy it otherwise, so they're two item limited, and it doesn't stack, so you can only get one. Tome of Knowledge. This is an old Warcraft 3 thing. For 150 gold, it grants you 425 experience. So it starts out of stock and increments stock every 10 minutes. First one's available at the 10-minute mark. I'm guessing this is the same for... I don't know if this means that it's like smoke and anybody can buy it, or each person gets their own. But it starts out of stock and every 10 minutes. So the first one you can buy is 10 minutes in. And 10 minutes in, usually... this is probably pretty worth it, because if you're talking about experience levels... this could be the difference between getting level 6, for example. So if you're a little bit behind on a support but you have a lot of gold, then boom, you can go back to base, buy a Tome of Knowledge, TP to a lane, and boom, you're 6, for example. So there's things like that. I think this will get used 100%. If people are on the verge of leveling up, I think they will buy it. And it's not so expensive that people just never buy it. Like 150 gold is not bad. That's 3 creeps. And 425 experience, it's like using a Midas like once or twice. So maybe people will focus on things like Tome of Knowledges rather than buying a Hand of Midas. That's a possibility. There are some negatives with that, though. It's that the more levels you have, that means that the more gold you feed when you die, and the longer that you're dead. So those are negatives to leveling up too much. But most of the time, it's going to be beneficial. I could definitely justify as a support buying these occasionally, maybe once per game, to get a big level like level 6 if you're behind, for example. I think that would be worth it in a lot of cases. But it does take 10 minutes, so that's the only weird part. Hurricane Pike, new item, Force Staff, Dragon Lance, and a recipe. Kind of a weird item. So it's only going to be good on heroes that buy Force Staff, minimum. And Dragon Lance increases your attack range, so ideally a ranged hero. So ranged heroes that buy Force Staff, okay? Recipe is 250. Gives you 20 agility, 15 strength, 10 intelligence. So basically all stats, mostly agi though. And 4 HP regen. And it gives you the attack range. And it has an active. When you use it on an enemy, it pushes you both away from each other, 450 units each. So you spread out. 450 is not super big though. It's more like boop. And then they allow you to attack that target without range restrictions for 4 attacks for a maximum of 5 seconds. So, and it doesn't give vision over the enemy, and it works normally like Force Staff, so that you have to be able to see them for you to kill them. So for example, if they TP back to base, you can't just keep attacking them 4 times. Unless you have track, then you can. It doesn't give vision, and it works like Force Staff when used on self. So you can still Force Staff yourself, in which case the cooldown is 20 seconds. And you can still Force Staff your allies, but if you use it on an enemy, it spreads you out a little bit, and then you get to attack them 4 times. So this would be beneficial from ranged heroes that don't want people to be attacking them. So for example, I wouldn't buy it on Sniper, but you could buy it on Sniper. It would push you away from each other a little bit. You could resume attacking them, and it could be useful. There's other ways you could use this. You could use this to, for example, blink past somebody and force them up a cliff, for example. Stuff like that. But again, you're still buying a Force Staff, and you're still buying a Dragon Lance. And there's probably some hero this will work with, but right now I'm just not seeing the value super big, because you've got a Force Staff and then you have a Dragon Lance. Those are 2 items that are very situational. Very, very situational. So I'm having trouble thinking about why I would care about my range restriction that much, but this item sounds good if you have a starter or a bounty on your team. But other than that, right now I'm a little confused. Drow is another hero that wants people to be far away from him, obviously, but is it worth buying a Force Staff on Drow Ranger? Maybe it will be now. Who knows? But the stats it gives you are really not good. 20 agility, the strength is good, the int is kind of irrelevant. There's maybe some hero this is good on, but right now this looks awfully confusing. The benefit that it gives you is just so weird. It's like so situational. It's like it gives you no range restrictions. That part is extremely situational. The pushing you away from another guy, that's useful for a lot of heroes. And it's on a 14-second cooldown, but I'm just not completely sold on this item yet. I think it's a little bit too weird. But I do like all of these common items that will fill your inventory, like Force Staff, that they do have some outs. You can build them into something else, like same thing with Orchid, for example. You can build it into something that's better. And I kind of like that. That's pretty cool. Alright, next item, Skull Basher. Bash damage is reduced heavily from 120 to 85. The cost has also gone down by 250. Basher at the moment doesn't do much damage unless you bash. So It's gotten a bit worse, but it is less expensive. That part's kind of cool. Abyssal Blade now is really weird. Requires a Basher, a Vanguard, and a 1550 recipe. So before it had a Sacred Relic, so now it's going to lose a lot of damage surely. Cost goes down by 350, and now provides 10 damage, 10 strength. That's it. It's like really bad damage. Used to do 10 strength, 70 damage. 250 health, and 15 HP regen. So it gives you a ridiculous amount of regen. So now it's kind of like an item. It gives you damage block, of course, and the Overwhelm, which is the stun. The mana cost has gone down by 75, and the cooldown goes down to 35, and the bash damage reduced to 85. So it's basically like a... I mean, it's still pretty good, but are there a lot of heroes that you buy Basher and Vanguard on? If there are, then this is a great item, because it gives you 15 HP per second. That's a lot. That's a lot of item. And it gives you damage block and health, but like, late game Vanguards are not very good, and this is one way to solve that problem, because now the Vanguard turns into something. I think that's kind of why this is happening. It's not really like, oh, Abyssal Blade is too OP. It's basically like, Vanguard never builds into anything. It's never purchased because it's 2,000 gold, and it doesn't transition very well. But now it's going to transition. You could buy it on Spectre, for example. That's not good because your illusions can't bash, but there's got to be some carry heroes where getting a Vanguard is pretty good. And this way you can transition into an Abyssal Blade. I do like the fact that the Overwhelm's cooldown is lowered. That's pretty cool. The mana cost is lowered. That's really cool. But the item does almost no damage. It's literally a Basher and a Vanguard and you're paying for an active. So you're pretty much paying... You get a lot of regen increase because you get 15, or Vanguard's like, what, 8, 7, 6, something like that. But you're basically paying 1550 for the Overwhelm active. That's pretty good. If you're a melee hero that can close the gap, that's pretty good. But the damage it provides is awful right now. But, yeah, we'll see. It's good if you can work the build out. If you can't work the build out, if you don't want to have to put a Vanguard into your build, this build sucks. One thing you may see is Vanguard Anti-Mage in the future. Nah, that sucks. Maybe. You might see Vanguard instead of the Vlads now. Definitely a possibility on AM. Alright, Aether Lens. Spell amp damage goes down to 5% instead of 8. So still worth buying the item in almost all cases. In a lot of cases, the amp damage wasn't really worth it anyways. For some cores that buy Aether Lens, which is semi-rare, I don't think this is a huge deal. In most cases, you still buy Aether Lens for the fact that it increases your cast range, because it gives you a lot of options that you didn't have before. Animal Courier respawn time goes down by 20 seconds. This is good because getting sniped when your courier was running around was a huge... It just wrecked you, so I like that they reduced this. Armlet now gives you 5 armor when you turn it on, which means it gives you 10 armor. This remains to be one of the most effective items in the game, considering it costs like 2,300 gold, and it gives you 10 armor, which is equivalent to a 1,400 gold item, by the way. It gives you 10 armor, it gives you 60 damage if you're a strength hero, otherwise it gives you, I believe, 35. It gives you like 30 attack speed. Only downside is you lose HP while you use it, but this is like the most Dragonite item ever now, honestly. Armlet Dragonite, I kind of think should be core. I think Armlet Dragonite is definitely the way to play Dragonite now. Because if you hit like level 10, you're going to have 12 in Dragon Blood, 12 armor from Dragon Blood. Turn on Armlet, that's 22 armor, plus your base. It's like an actual insurmountable amount of armor. It's actually ridiculous. Maybe that's the build. Dragonite Armlet. Blade Mail now returns damage before any kind of reduction. It returns it in the same type as it was received, and no longer ignores spell immune enemies, which means it still can't hurt spell immune targets if the original damage type cannot, like magic. But if, for example, you've got a enchantress who is throwing impetus shots and you have a Blade Mail on and she has a BKB on, it's still going to hurt her because that pure damage goes through magic immunity. So you might be a little confused. Does this look OP? It's basically how Spectre works right now. She reflects the damage type that she takes. So there's going to be some times that Blade Mail is really effective. For example, if I'm against a PA with a BKB and she does a lot of physical damage, if she jumps on me and I Blade Mail, it's going to do damage to her. She has to not hit me. Blade Mail kind of... Like, the problem with Blade Mail before is that it's a cheap item, it can reflect damage, but it's countered by BKB. And against a carry that's beating me already, Blade Mail is just not good, because if she goes on me and she BKBs, my Blade Mail doesn't do anything except for give me like 5 armor or whatever. But now it's actually going to buy me time, so we may see a lot more supports going into a Blade Mail build instead of a Ghost Scepter build. Much more likely. The only case that that's not going to happen is in the case of Juggernaut, for example. Like, damn it. Juggernaut's Omni Slash, obviously, he's invulnerable when he Omnis you, so you're still going to want to get Ghost Scepter. But from heroes that aren't like going invulnerable while they deal damage to you, Blade Mail is definitely going to be a support option now. Especially in heroes like maybe Ogre Magi, for example, it could be really good. Against Magic Nukers, Blade Mail is not, like, Magic Nuke carries, like Lina, for example. Blade Mail's not really going to work very well. But I think there's more options to get Blade Mail now, if you use it correctly. We'll see. Bloodstone initial charges goes up to 12. Each charge gives you 1 extra mana per second, and it reduces the amount of time you're dead, and heals your allies more. So this is kind of a cool change. Butterfly Flutter goes down, totally fine. Cooldown reduced on Crimson Guard by 10, and the HP regen increased by 2 to match Vanguard. Apparently Vanguard does go up a lot. Desolator now requires the Blightstone, we already talked about that. Diffusal Blade, Purge cooldown. I really like how they changed Diffusal here. It's a nerf buff, basically. So now you can't use Purge endlessly. It goes from 0 to 2 seconds, which I think is fine, because personally I burn through those charges too fast anyways, so I like being limited a bit. The mana burned by melee and ranged illusions is reduced to 20/10, so it's a little bit worse for PL illusions. Doesn't mana drain as fast. But when you buy it, it goes up a lot. This is on melee and range heroes, you burn 40 mana. So technically this is a damage increase if you buy Diffusal Blade and you're not an illusion-based hero. Because now, every mana burn you do, it does physical damage. So basically, Diffusal Blade now, if I just buy this on a non-illusion hero, my damage goes up by 15, if I'm mana burning them. So if they go magic immune, then I don't lose that I don't gain that damage. But if they're not magic immune, I'm going to gain an extra 15 damage per hit. I also really like this because it also justifies Diffusal Blade on a hero that isn't necessarily a illusion-based one. If you can buy it for mana burn reasons if you're not an illusion-based hero, because you didn't get a lot of mana burn unless you had illusions, a lot of sources hitting. But now, 40 per hit, that's not that bad. You can attack 10 times and burn 400 mana. That's actually significant. So I think there's some cases where buying Diffusal Blade may actually be worth it on some cores, where it wasn't really that worth it before. It's still really good with illusions. For example, if I get a Manta and Juggernaut and I have a Diffusal Blade, I'm still going to be burning 40 per hit, and my illusions are going to be burning 20 per hit. But together, they're going to be burning 40 mana per hit instead of 50. I think that's completely fine. I would definitely call this a buff to Diffusal Blade. It's bad against Global Silence and using it to save your allies, but in terms of offensive capabilities as a carry item, this item is much better. Maybe not much. It's better, I would say. Alright, Dragonlance now requires Ogre Club and a 2x Band of Elven Skin. That's the +6 agility instead of Ogre Club and Quarterstaff. So now when you disassemble it, it's not going to turn it into a butterfly anymore. It's more like you can turn it into 2 pairs of treads, or you can turn it into like a treads Yasha or something like that. Treads Yasha, is that the one way to do it, I guess? So it used to provide 10 strength, 10 damage, 10 attack speed, and the attack range. Now it provides 15 strength, 15 agility, and 130. I really like the fact that they changed the stats of the item, because if you were an agility, if you're an agility hero before, it's like, why would I make this item? It's so bad. It gives you 10 strength, which is fine, and it gives you 10 damage and 10 attack speed. Like, anybody can buy that, but rather than having the item fit anybody, it should really fit some heroes. That way it's more useful to those heroes. So now it's not good on an int carry, like OD, for example. It's pretty much just not good on OD anymore. Not that many ODs bought it, but now it's actually going to be good on heroes like Drow Ranger. It's better for her now, because it gives her more strength. And also, you get benefit from the item, by the way. You're getting extra stats instead of before where you just got the same stats. The only benefit was this. Now it's better. It gives you 15 strength, and it gives you 15 damage, and it gives you 15 attack speed. So it's actually just better. If you compare this to this as an agility hero, you get 50% more strength, you get 50% more damage, and you get 50% more attack speed. And you also get armor. You get an extra 2 armor by this item now. It's actually not bad. Dragonlance may be the new drum. Is that wrong to say? I actually kind of agree with what I just said. I kind of feel like this is the new drum in some ways for a lot of potential mid heroes. With that said, let's talk about drum really quick. Drum now requires a Bracer, Ring of Regen, Windlace, and a 700 recipe. So the cost has gone down by 75. Before you guys rage, it previously gave you +9 to all stats, gave you 3 damage, and the passive and the active. Now it provides 9 int, 6 strength, 3 agility, and 3 damage. It also gives you 3 HP regen, plus the active. So this now means that this item is far worse for agility carries. You don't want to buy it on agility carries because the damage is now 6 instead of 12. And it gives you 6 less agility, which is 6 damage, 6 attack speed, and 1 armor, about. So now Drum is more of a support item. These are stats that kind of remind me of supports. If you're an int carry, then this is still a good item, but it gives you less HP to the tune of 60, and it gives you less damage, and it gives you less armor. It does give you HP regen, but this is kind of a support item or an int carry. I think you could still buy it on heroes like Death Prophet, for example, but because cores are going to buy it less now, it's going to further incentivize supports to buy it, because you still should have a drum for the active in the first couple fights, because it'll help your team a lot. 20 attack speed, 10 movement speed is a lot. But a hero like, I don't know, Ember Spirit buying this now, does he really need 9 intelligence? It's kind of good on Ember Spirit because the movement speed increases, but maybe it's better to buy something else instead. So this is kind of a nerf to strong early game cores, and the item is now shifted towards a support way, and I kind of like how this works. Windlace, by the way, is that movement speed item. So it's now a bracer. You'll see a lot more early bracer purchases on supports, I think, because supports are going to be incentivized by the item. Ring of Regen, yeah, the item sucks. Windlace, I could see a lot of supports running around with like bracer or Windlace with like a Tranquil Boots. And a 700 recipe is what you finish it out with. So I'll probably try to buy this on more supports now, because my cores are probably not going to buy it, but we'll see. You're not going to see every hero buying Drum now, especially not on agility carries. They're probably just going to go Aquila Wand instead of maybe Aquila Drum. Something like that is my expectation. Yule's Scepter now requires Windlace instead of Sage's Mask. I believe that's a buff to Yule's, by the way, because Windlace is less expensive than Sage's Mask. Basically, Yule's is 100 gold less now. So, a little bit less expensive, which is probably fine. People buy Yule's very rarely now. It's not as good as it used to be. Flying Courier cost reduced? Hell yeah. Gem True Sight Radius reduced by a little bit. Ghost Scepter cooldown reduced by 5. Glimmer Cape mana cost reduced again, which I think is good. I think Glimmer's in a pretty good place right now. It's not too OP anymore. It's kind of bad, but it's sometimes good. So situational, that's where the item should be. Guardian Greaves cost goes up, actually, surprisingly. Heart of Tresk has now shifted its health cost got reduced by, or health bonus got reduced by 50, but now it gives you 5 more strength, which translates to 100. So this is in it. Heart basically does 50 more HP than it used to. Oh, actually, it's way more, because remember they changed how much a strength point gives you. So for example, before it was 40 times 19, which equals this, plus 300. So Heart used to give you 1060 HP, right? Now it gives you 45 times 20, which equals 900 plus 250. So it's about 1,000 more, about 90 more HP, I believe. I didn't mean to close that. I made a mistake. Move it away. Alright, Heaven's Helper Disarm on ranged targets increased by a second. That's pretty good. Definitely a situational item. Most of the time there's better pickups, but it can be used. Hood of Defiance, remove 1 ring of regen from Hood of Defiance. I think this is a pretty big buff to Hood, and Pipe as well, because now it's going to cost like 3,300 to build a Pipe. Hood itself is now 875 plus 350 plus the cloak, which is worthy of a calculator. 550 plus 350 plus 875. So Hood now for 1,700. So you can get the barrier ability, which is 400 damage, 325? 325 damage block, I think, for 1,700. Keep in mind, Secret was buying some hoods pretty often at the ESL Manila major, or it's not a major, ESL Manila. So I think there's some value in buying hoods right now that some teams are maybe not exploring. But it seemed that Secret was very stat efficient and item efficient focused at the majors, so I think they're kind of onto something here. There's a lot of items that were really efficient in the previous patch, so they may remain on that. Lincoln Sphere's cost reduced by 325. This is a huge buff to Lincoln's. This cost is massively reduced, but I really think they did need to do this. The item was too expensive. It was still purchased sometimes, but it can be more encouraged now. Plus the item just looks so cool. I just want to buy it all the time. Lotus Orb now requires an energy booster instead of a 900 gold recipe. Now provides 250 mana, and HP regen goes up by 1 because of the Ring of Health change. So, what's kind of cool about this is that a lot of heroes can now transition to Lotus Orb, less expensive. Like, if you can take your Arcane Boots, which, by the way, in a super late game scenario are less good than they used to be. Firstly, because you kind of maybe want to go Boots of Travel. And secondly, because sometimes you just have like an energy booster laying around. And when you get to a late game scenario as a high int hero, then the amount of mana that the Arcane actually heals you is very low. It doesn't give you very much. So, if your team doesn't need it and you don't super want that and you'd rather have a percentage-based mana regen item, then you can disassemble it and make a Lotus Orb. And this basically means that, so it doesn't make the Lotus Orb cheaper at all, but if you're in a hero that buys Arcane Boots, you can transition into a Lotus Orb less expensively. So if I'm playing Earthshaker and I'm doing really well and I'm in the mid to late game and I'm like, I actually want to buy a Lotus Orb, I can now disassemble my energy booster to make a Lotus Orb out of it. And it's fine then, because it still gives me a big mana pool, because it still gives you 250, but it also now gives me like 150, 200% mana regen, whatever it gives you, which is going to cover my mana needs. So now I can transition back into a Boots of Travel, or I can just keep round boots, or I can go late game tranquil boots or something on Earthshaker. All these options now exist because of this, so I really like this change. The only downside to this is that it makes it slightly harder to buy the item, but in a lot of cases people will have that energy booster. So I do like the fact that energy booster, aka Arcane Boots, is so disassemblable now. It really lets you transition your item build in a lot of ways. It's just giving more options to more builds, and that's always a good thing, in my opinion. Almost always, unless you overdo it. Mask of Madness active damage amp is reduced by 5%. Medallion now requires a Blightstone instead of the recipe, so I could see, like I said, Dazzle or some other supports picking this up in the early game. At the least, it's going to increase your Roche speed by a lot. So it's like a poor man's Medallion. It will make you Roche faster. You don't have to have the 1200 gold item or whatever to be able to Roche. -2 armor, it matters, considering Wave of Terror does -3. And people always talk about that being important. Observer Ward, these are pretty big changes. The gold experience rescaled from 50 gold, 100 experience to 100 gold, 25 experience. I really like this. This basically means that now, if you put a sentry down and you get an Observer Ward, you get your money back. That's pretty awesome. You don't get as much experience. It's not like a bounty rune anymore, but this is more balanced, in my opinion. It was kind of silly to make it experience based, in my opinion. I think the reason they did it was because if supports are dewarding, they're not getting experience. But I like the idea a bit better that they make up their gold from sentrying. You're going to see a lot more people guess the sentries now, myself included. Normally I don't really like doing it too much, but it's definitely going to be more worth it now. Duration reduced from 7 to 6 minutes. The restock interval has been decreased, so that means it will spawn more often. And the cost is also reduced to buy. It costs 65 gold to buy a ward now instead of 75. So we may see some starting item builds change. Octarine Core no longer provides HP regen. The mana regen is reduced, so just an overall nerf to Octarine, which I think is fine. Because these are... Basically, Octarine is good for what it does. It didn't really need to have HP regen, and the mana regen... Usually, when you buy Octarine, you already have some other way of mana regen, so I think this is fine. It's basically letting Octarine do what it still does really well, but it's getting rid of all these weird side benefits that were just put in so that people would buy Octarine Core. So I kind of like that this has changed. Perseverance, HP regen from 5 to 6, because again, Ring of Health has been changed. I wish they just would have showed me like Ring of Health changing at the start so I'd like know what the hell's going on all the time. Pipe of Insight, remove Pipe of Insight barrier, stack, limit, duration. I don't know what that means. Stack limit duration. Does it just mean you can buy pipes on multiple people? I don't think so. I'm not quite sure what this means. Maybe this meant that it didn't stack with barrier from the hood? I'm not sure. Maybe I feel like the reason they did this, if that is what I just said, it's probably because of the magic amp thing. That magic spells would just be a little bit too good over the course of the game. Perhaps? Not sure. Point booster health bonus. Because, like, keep in mind, like, even heroes like Crystal Maiden are going to get better, right? Like, if we look at my hero, I've got 19 int right now. Let's see. 19. I just gained 50 int. And now... Oh, I see. It says right there. Every 16 points increase spell damage by 1. It's not going to say how much damage you do. But I just increased my mana by 50. So I just gave myself a total of... What was it like? What was it? What was the percentage based int? Yeah, this is going to take forever. Can't remember what it's called. There we go. 16. So if I increase it by 50, I basically increased all of my magic spells by 3%. So even like on Crystal Maiden, for example, did I get down to that stuff yet? No, I was still on items. If I'm playing Crystal Maiden, I've now increased my magic damage by 3%. It's not massive, but it's an increase, right? So you kind of need to offset that, in my opinion, by making an ability to prevent against magic damage a bit better. All int casters, all int heroes got a buff, basically. Except for the fact that their mana pools are slightly lower, because now an int point only gives you 12 mana instead of 13. That's the only nerf that they got, I think, across the board. Although I guess heroes did also get more HP per strength, so does that offset it? I guess maybe that's why they did that, because otherwise int heroes would get buffed. So keep in mind that for every point of strength that you now get 20 strength instead of 19. So basically strength heroes got slightly tankier, and int heroes got slightly higher damage, which should about offset how much damage you do. So for example, if my int increased by 50 on Crystal Mania, I went from 19 to 70, I think, something like that. So we'll minus this. And then we'll divide this by 16, which should give me about 3 remainder. Okay, so my percentage increase goes up by 3%. So if I do a 250 damage nuke, and I multiply that by 3%, I'm doing 7.5 more damage. Which, over the course of 30 strength, that means their HP goes up by 30. Which is basically an offset my full spell rotation. If I cast 2 spells, like if I cast Frostbite and I cast Crystal Nova, I'm doing about the same damage as their HP increased. A little bit less because of reduction. So I think that's why they also increased strength. They had to do both. It might have been like a 3-way collaboration of buffs, but I think that's why this is existing. Alright, point booster health bonus reduced from 200 to 175, and the mana bonus increased, so it's a slightly worse HP item. Refresher Orb, HP regen increase. See, Ring of Health change that son of a bitch. Aquila gets a nerf, only gives aura for the armor, so it gives you 1 less armor than it did before, and I think that needed to happen because this item is way too good right now. Everybody was buying it on like strength heroes, agility heroes, int heroes, all cores. They were buying Ring of Aquila. The reason for that is because a Wraith band gives you 6 agility, 3 strength, 3 int, plus 3 damage. When you make it into a Ring of Aquila, it gives you 9 agility, 3 strength, 3 int, and plus 3 damage. So it was just super cost efficient. It would give you 3 armor base, well 2 aura, 1 armor, and then it would give you 9 agility, which is another armor plus another third of an armor. So Aquila would give you 4 and a third armor for a 1,000 gold item. That's pretty good. Not to mention if you're an agility hero, it gave you way more damage than that. It would give you 9 plus 9, 9 plus 9. Yeah, 9 plus 9, 18 damage. 18 damage on an agility hero. On an int hero, it would only give you 9 plus 3, which is 12. Still pretty good. It was just a really good survivability item for the early game. That's why we started seeing it built on all heroes. We'll see it built a little bit less now, because it's worse on all heroes in terms of armor. It's still going to give you 3 armor, 3 and a third armor on any hero, but on, well, the damage has gone up by 1 to compensate. But I'm not sure this is a big enough of a nerf to see it stop being purchased on non-agility carries. But at least it gives you less armor. I think that's important. Ring of Basilia is the same thing. Armor reduced by 1, so pushing is a little bit harder. Damage bonus increases by 1. Ring of Health, there you are, you son of a bitch. Ring of Regen, cost reduced by 25. Oh, that's cool. That matters for a lot of things, actually. The hood was cheaper. Tranquil Boots are cheaper. That means Tranquil Boots now cost. That's right, 500 gold even to upgrade, thank God. Oh, it was always 525. I was like, this is just annoying. It's 525, why can't it be 500? Now my dreams are come true. Alright, Rod of Atos removed the chance to true strike on target. They did this because of the Orchid upgrade. Nobody used it that way anyways, like, and why would you? Why would you spend 3,100 gold on an item that, like, could increase your ability to hit somebody by, like, 40%? It, like, was so minor. Just so minor. Kind of cool idea in practice, but in execution, nobody was going to pay for that. Sange, the maim increase has gone up to 20%, so that's 1 out of 5 hits, and now it is reduced to slow if you're a ranged hero. I like this, that they nerfed S and Y for ranged heroes. The maim chance has gone up, but now for ranged maimers, it only reduces, that sounds like I was saying memers, but ranged maimers, it reduces the slow by 13% instead of 26 for melee. I actually like that they're increasing this chance here. It's going to encourage a lot of melee heroes to buy Sange and Yasha. And it should help make up for their lack of movement speed. Keep in mind they also did increase the attack range of melee heroes, so that plus Sange and Yasha means that we could see some really annoying melee cores come out that we didn't really expect to play against in the past. 3 out of 30% is such a big chance. That's 3 out of 10. Although in a lot of cases you can get stunned and walk away. Maybe we'll see the comeback of Troll, for example. Shadow Amulet cost reduced by 100, so that means Glimmer got a pretty big buff there. Mana cost going down to 90, and the Amulet being reduced to 1300. We could also see more heroes just buy Shadow Amulet to buy Shadow Amulet. I don't think that's ridiculous. It's actually pretty good. In some cases, having a Shadow Amulet by itself is better than having a Glimmer Cape right now. Especially in low MMRs, I guarantee if people knew how to play around it, Like, you could abuse so many bad players that don't have detection. Although, people should have sentries more often now because of the getting a ward, getting 100 gold thing. Silver Edge now requires Shadow Blade and Ultimate Orb instead of Shadow Blade, Sange, and a recipe. I really like this change. So, before it gave you 16 strength, 32 damage, 30 attack speed. Now it gives you 30 damage, 30 attack speed, and 15 dull stats. This is important because before, when you'd buy Silver Edge, you're basically taking a Shadow Blade, which isn't a very good stat item, doesn't really give you stats, just gives you attack speed and damage. And then you'd make it into a strength damage item that gives you attack speed. That doesn't fit almost all heroes. All the heroes that buy this, in most cases, aren't strength heroes. So this strength bonus it gives you is really not very good. But now that it takes an Ultimate Orb instead, and it is quite a bit cheaper, by the way. Now that it does that instead, you can justify buying this on pretty much any hero that buys Silver Edge. Just about any hero that buys Silver Edge, you can be like, yeah, I can justify putting an Ultimate Orb into that, because you get 15 stats. It's not 10 stats, it's 15. This was an item that gave you equal efficiency to what the Sange gave. This is an item that gives you far better experience or efficiency than what Ultimate Orb does. You can buy this on any Shadow Blade hero now. Honestly, I honestly feel that way. Maybe you don't transition right into it, because stats generally give you more survivability than they give you damage. So, for example, maybe it's better to go Shadow Blade to Daedalus, and then it is to go... Not that those items compare, obviously, cost-wise, but then it is to go into Silver Edge with the Ultimate Orb. But if you're like a Shadow Blade carrier and you want generic stats and maybe you're semi-tanky, then going this build is clearly better. It doesn't say that it doesn't maim anymore as well. I don't know if that's a bug. If it can... Does it still maim? I think... Does Silver Edge still maim at all? Or is it just not maim anymore? I can't remember if it did or not, because I almost never buy it. But if it still maims, then this is either an oversight or kind of really good. But I do like the fact that it gives 15 all stats. You can justify buying this late game a lot more now. Keep in mind it applies Break, which removes passives for 4 seconds, something like that. So it's really good against some heroes. Also, the backstab damage reduction increased, so it means when you hit people, all damage that they output for 4 or 5 seconds is now 50% of what it used to be. That includes spells, by the way. So it's quite good for initiating. Smoke and Deceit replenish time goes up by a minute, or decreases, so you can buy it more often. And it no longer has a cooldown attached to your hero. I really like this change. This one kind of needed to happen. This is kind of annoying. You use it on the courier, then it'd be on cooldown for 90 seconds. Like, let people use smokes when they want to use smokes. It's not like you can use them all the time, you know? So, and now you can use a smoke. Don't find anybody smoke again. Go find them, for example. Soul Booster, no longer HP regen. Very standard. We've seen this before. Talisman goes down by 100. Town Portal Scroll goes down to 50 gold. You should almost always buy TP Scrolls right away as a support now. Like, this is just so justifiable. There it is. Vanguard, HP regen, 6 to 8. Veil now requires Helm of Iron Will, 2 times Null Talisman, and a 400 recipe. So it's nerfed, basically. Whenever something has a recipe, this gold is sunk. Whereas before, if you put an item in here, it should technically give you a better item. So basically, the only thing that was changed was that it gives you 12 int instead of 18. This needed to happen because the item was too good. You could see that at ESL Manila because they bought it on like OD. Because the item was it was like a better version of Drum. It was a different version of Drum. It was just too stat efficient that it was worth buying in almost all cases. But it's a little bit worse now. We're still going to see it purchased on a lot of heroes because the stats that it gives are still really good. But you can't necessarily just greed it out as an int item anymore. Whereas before, you definitely could justify that. Like, it almost gave you as much int as a freaking Mystic Staff did. And it costed less. Like, Veil of Discord, very good item. We'll still see it purchased, but it won't be purchased on heroes that don't actually need it anymore. I don't think you can justify buying it on OD anymore, for example. And you can also Dispel the Veil, which I think is pretty worth it. It's good for PL as well, because it would reveal which one of him is real. So now you can diffusal it, so you take less damage. Veil of, armor reduced from 5 to 4, so again, pushing a little bit worse. Kind of looking like AM can more and more justify getting the Vanguard. In a lot of ways, he really can. Only downside to getting Vanguard over Vlad's, though, for an AM, in my opinion, is that you don't get the mana aura. That part's kind of tough. And I guess not having lifesteal can be a big deal. So you won't be able to regen as fast after you lose a lot of HP. But the fact that you can Vanguard into Abyssal may offset this and make it worth it. Oh, also the fact that your Mantle Illusions now get damage block. Vanguard may be worth it, maybe the new AM build. It's actually a cheaper item too, because Vanguard only costs you like, what, 2k or something like that? What's the total cost for Vanguard? That's not it. Vanguard, where are you? I never buy you. 2150 versus Vlad's 24 something. Oh, it's 2275. Okay, I guess it's about the same cost. I don't know why I thought this was 24. Yeah, about the same. Stupid game. There we go. Alright, heroes now. Curse of Avenir is slow, buffed at level 1. Not a big deal. Cold Feet got changed. It has a 7-second cooldown at level 4 now. That's really good. I think if you got an Octarine core, this would be OP. But obviously that's a really expensive item. But if I take 7 and I multiply it by 0.75, which should be what Octarine core puts at, that's 5.25 seconds. You cast Cold Feet every 5.25 seconds. And that, like, it's a 4-second stun. Like, it actually stuns for 4 seconds. I'm quite sure. Let's just leave this game. Alright, where are you at? AA. Oh, I'm sorry, 3.5. So, it stuns for 3.5 seconds. The cooldown is 5.25. You could genuinely just wreck people with Cold Feet at level 4. This is a huge Cold Feet buff. I like this skill. I liked it before. I like it a lot right now. We're not going to see core AA or anything like that. But I like the change. I think it's nice. Alright, Arc Warden got moderately changed. Oh yeah, by the way, the damage intervals are a little different. They now are done at 1, 2, and 3 damage. That's basically at what time does the damage apply. So it's a little bit worse against Blink heroes now. Alright, Flux, the first skill from Arc Warden no longer slows magic immune units. That needed to be changed because you could get Flux, you'd BKB or spin, and it would still affect you slow-wise. That sucked. You can Purge it, needed to happen. The slow got rescaled, so it's worse at level 1. That also needed to happen. The skill was way too good. Magnetic Field overall got buffed, but slightly nerfed. The cooldown is reduced down to 20 seconds at level 4. The duration has gone up over time to 6.5 at level 4, but now you only evade if the attacks are done outside the field. So if you cast it on top of a tower and stand on the tower and attack the tower is still going to hit you. So it's only attacks that come from the outside. So against melee heroes, it's actually not good anymore at all. This is why it got buffed. It's actually kind of bad now, I guess, in a lot of ways. So if you're melee, it counters you. Although one thing you could do is try to stand on the edge. If you stand on the edge of the field, and then when people attack you, it won't work. They'd have to run past you. So there's tricks you can use to make it work. If you stand on the edge, then it's more likely that they will attack from the outside in, and then they'll miss. So that's how you have to play it. Spark Wraith mana cost reduced from 100 to 130 to a constant 80. This is a big buff, I think. The Spark Wraith activation delay reduced from 3 to 2, so it's faster to cast it on heroes that are moving. And it now applies a Purge, aka a slow. And the damage is rescaled. It does slightly less damage at all levels, most importantly at level 1. But the fact that it costs 80 mana now means you can spam this like crazy, and the fact that it purges is pretty cool, actually. You could kind of just throw these all over the battlefield and slow the shit out of your opponents. And it's also worth leveling it up now, too, because the damage that it gets per level is significantly better. Plus, it doesn't increase the mana cost as you level it up, so you'll see people max out Spark Wraith now. Tempest Double no longer has an HP and mana cost, which is cool. It also, the item and ability cooldowns now persist on the unit. So when you spawn your ultimate, you don't get to Midas and Necro 3 every time now. It means that it's the cooldowns are linked between the two. So you can't level as fast, you can't get gold as fast, you can't split push as fast, you can't BKB every time your Tempest Double comes up. All this shit needed to happen. That stuff was way too good. Also, it no longer replicates items that drop on death, such as Gem and Divine Rapier. Praise the Lord. It was way too good. It like broke any chance of that hero being fair when every time that you could just spawn free Divine Rapiers and use them. It was so stupid. The hero was fun to play, I thought, but if you buy Rapiers on it, it just breaks the whole hero. There's no reason to go anything other than Rapiers on that hero when you could buy Rapiers. So that annoyed me. But I really do like these changes. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, we're not done yet. The cooldown reduced for the ultimate down by a lot. 50 seconds down to 30. So it still can be used for Midas and stuff like that. But now the cooldowns are matched to your hero, and that's how it should be, I think. But you get your Tempest Double more often. But the cooldown has been reduced. 12 seconds uptime to 14 seconds. So your illusion won't be, or your guy won't be there as long. But it doesn't really matter that much because all of your cooldowns are pretty long anyways. Flux, Magnetic Field, the only exception is Spark Wraith, being like a 4-second cooldown or whatever. But it's still about your items. You can still get a Tempest Double when you want to push faster, for example, or Midas or whatever. And it's still good for item cooldowns and stuff. If you get a Hex on your hero with a Blink Dagger, it's still really good. Because you can Blink, Hex, and attack and all that stuff. The cast point increases as well. Apparently the Tempest Double didn't have cast animations. Oh, maybe that's just the ultimate. I think to activate the ultimate actually has an animation. Before it didn't. Also, your strength growth gets increased by 0.4, and your intelligence growth also increased. Keep in mind he's an agility hero, so his damage doesn't increase, but his HP and his int does. I think this needed to happen, especially with the magnetic field change, And the int increasing is also kind of nice, I guess. You're much more of a Spark Wraith hero, basically. I like these changes to Arc Warden. He's probably still potentially OP. Not as OP as he used to be, though. I really like that they changed the item cooldowns. I really like that they removed Rapier. And I like that they changed all these skills to have more outplayability for your opponents and for yourself. People can play around Magnetic Field now. They can play around the Spark Wraith. Or you can actually use Spark Wraith for something other than damage. That's cool. It gives you some slow. They can play around Flux. It's not just super OP against BKB heroes. All these things needed to change. I'm really happy with it. Alright, X. Counter Helix damage type from physical to pure. And also the damage has been changed. So this is actually a huge buff to X. Level 1, this may... The fact that it only does 10 less damage, but it does pure damage is pretty incredible. Against a lot of heroes, this is really strong. Anybody that has really high base strength or base armor, Axe wrecks them now. Terror Blade, Phantom Lancer, stuff like that. Axe is really good against them. In the late game, same story. Axe is going to scale so much better now in terms of counter helix. So much better. Because physical damage doesn't do as well late game if it's not increasing. Pure damage is always going to be good. The other thing that this is huge about is that Axe is really good at ancient jungling now. He used to be not very good at it because of the fact that they have armor auras and all that crap. But the fact that this does pure damage in AoE means that Axe is quite arguably one of the best ancient junglers now, very similar to like Sven. He won't be able to do it as well as Sven does, but he's going to be pretty good at it. So we could see some resurgence of Axe offlane as a result of this. Honestly, definitely a possibility. Bane Enfeeble mana cost goes on to 95 at all levels. I really like this change. It's going to definitely encourage people to max out Enfeeble. Beastmaster Vision nerfs just for the Hawk, which I think is a fairly balanced way to do it. I think Beast is still good. This Day Vision is pretty big decrease, so 1250 versus 1600. But it honestly was too good. You could see way too much just by moving your Hawk through the jungle. You could see everything. Scepter to Bloodseeker gains 2 charges of Rupture with 40-second replenish. So this is pretty good. It gives you a situational item that you can build on this hero if you don't want a DPS. And Rupture is a really good skill. Like now you can cast it on 2 cores, for example, and potentially take 2 cores out of the fight. The cast point has increased from 0.6 to 0.4. And the strength growth is increased on the hero. So you can cast Rupture faster, and you can cast it twice. I really like this change on Bloodseeker. It's something that's situational. You could play potentially a 4-position Bloodseeker now, if you build eggs. I think that's honestly a potential factor. Bounty Hunter gets a nerf to Shadow Walk mana cost. Definitely needed. He's one of the most OP heroes at the moment, so it'll be harder for him to roam in the early game now. He will need more clarity potions. Brewmaster got moderately changed. The Pulverize was the chance to cleave that the Earth Bruling used to have. Now he just does bonus 150% to buildings, so he does more to buildings. But you don't really want a Brewmaster split just to do damage to buildings, so this is kind of irrelevant, but whatever. Also, they changed their hero type from Pierce to Hero for the Earth and the Storm ones. Before they had huge damage numbers, but that was because they did piercing damage, which does 50% to heroes. So with that in mind, let's do some calculations. The damage got reduced from 40 to 30. This is a buff of 50%, by the way, because remember before it did half, so 20%. Very good at killing creeps, bad at killing heroes. But you want to kill heroes with it, right? So you 50% damage increase at all levels? No. At late game, it's about the same, but at the first split, it's way better damage. Way better damage. For the Storm, it's actually exactly the same. It got halved. So, in fact, it's worse late game against heroes, but it's better early game. Actually, it's the same early game. It is the same middle, and late game it is worse. So the Storm, worse late game, Brew, slightly better late game, much better early game. So it's averaging out to be about the same. But I like that it's better early because the first level 1 split just feels very low in terms of damage. The Primal Spirit fire attack damage, he was hero damage the whole time, and he just got some consistency increases. So overall damage increase for sure on Brewmaster for right clicks. The Brewling's Windwalk backstab damage has been increased. It does scale now. So this is probably why they decreased his late game damage, was because people would use Windwalk in the late game, and now it's going to be buffed by a lot. And I always kind of felt like that. The Windwalk damage increase was really not very much, and now it's going to be good late game. 220 increase. Keep in mind this does benefit from attack type changes, so that means that if he does pure damage or piercing damage, and it's increased by 100, it's actually still not good because it's only an increase of 50 against heroes. Whereas now, this 100 damage increase for the Storm Panda, that's a shitload of damage on the first split. It's 100 damage. It is so much. It's actually one of the biggest damage components that the Primal Split does at level 1. Because this thing hits for, that's right, 20 hero damage. That means when you use the Windwalk on the Storm Bruling, You are doing a 5 freaking times crit. A 5 times crit. That's actually incredible. 5 times crit? Are you kidding me right now? Where's Brewmaster? What was I gonna look at? Oh yeah, I wanted to look at the cooldown. Well, this is probably the only way we can do it, just a demo here. Because usually you don't show things like that. Again, we have no sound right now, so it's gonna be a little weird. But I'm just gonna split here and take a look at some of the cooldowns. So this is a 20-second cooldown. So it's see like how little the damage is. Oh, it's 5 seconds. Oh, I can use that a lot. So you should basically cast this all the time. So when you play Brewmaster and you split now, what you need to do is you basically need to... My hotkeys are all messed up because of my change here. But this is what you need to do. You need to do this and hit and do this. And my hotkeys, again, I'll get them fixed. But so basically the whole time you should just be doing this. And this one too. So you basically should just be constantly... do like way more damage. Yeah, whatever. Quit. That's kind of cool. So... does way more damage to heroes, but you have to constantly use Windwalk. And the first duration is 15, so you can probably get at least 2 Windwalk hits in, which you should. That'll do 200 bonus physical. That right there is a lot. Plus the boulder's like 50, and the Earth Panda, or the Fire Panda hits for quite a bit. So pretty huge buffs to Brewmaster. This may make him OP, actually. In all honesty, it may make him OP. Just does so much damage at level 1 now. Bristleback quills more often now. This number used to be 250, now it's 210. So HP items on Bristle are way better. And keep in mind, he also got buffed because of the strength change. Gets slightly more HP with every strength point. Which maybe doesn't matter that much, actually, because he doesn't have a very good strength gain. But if his back is turned, he's going to quill a lot more often. If you get Scepter, range is increased. Centaur double-edged cooldown is reduced. That's the one that does 400 damage to him and his opponent. And his Stampede duration increased by 0.25 seconds. And Heart is now better on this hero as well, because of return. So decent Centaur buffs. He's going to be able to deal a lot more damage in team fights over time. 6 seconds is very short. If you get an Octarine, that's 4.5. Oh god, is Octarine Centaur a thing? Because you could do 400 damage every 4.5 seconds, I'm guessing. It should be 4 points. 4.5, yeah. That's pretty good. That's very often casting that spell. Hand of God no longer fully heals his creeps. A little bit of a Chen nerf. Clockwork. Battery assault damage. It's increased a lot by level 4, but it's other than that, it's about the same early game. Minor cleanup to power cogs, pushback, distance, and duration. It's these very weird numbers. Now it is equal numbers, rounded numbers. So very small buff to stun duration, inconsequential, and the distance is also fairly inconsequential. Crystal Maiden got a pretty big buff. 9-second cooldown at level 4 Crystal Nova. Keep in mind that skill lasts a very, very long time. It lasts a very long time. Lasts for 4.5 seconds. So if your cooldown goes down to 9, that means for 50% of the time that you cast this spell, basically 50% of the time, you are going to have a 50% movement and attack speed slow on heroes. That's really big. That's actually a lot. I like how they changed that about CN, that they lowered her cooldowns a lot. Like Frostbite, 6-second cooldown at level 4. Crystal Nova, 9-second cooldown. This means that you weave in and out of fights with Crystal Maiden, and you're really effective now. In the past, Frostbite was 10 seconds always, and Crystal Nova was always 15 seconds. Always. It means you had huge cooldowns on these abilities, but now they're pretty high uptime. 9 and 6 seconds. That's like actually kind of incredible how much uptime that is. You can actually disable somebody for a long time. Now her int is very weak. That's the problem. But to make up for some of that problem, our level 4 Arcane Aura now gives her 8 mana per second. So if we go back to what it used to give, I think it used to give 6, I believe. At level 4 now it gives 8. So hitting level 15 on this hero is actually really good now. Like 8 mana per second. That is so much. How much time is that, guys? That means over the course of 10 seconds, you get 80 mana. 80 freaking mana. Isn't that incredible? That means how much does it take to get 160 mana? 160 divided by 8. 20 seconds. Every 20 seconds you can cast Crystal Nova. That means, like, you could cast 2 Crystal Novas. Well, 20 seconds. It's just so much mana. It's actually incredible how much mana this is. That's only for self, though. I almost want to max out Frostbite and Crystal Nova now, but I like what Arcane Aura provides now. In the past, it gives you like, Yeah, it gives you a lot of mana, but that doesn't matter because what she was missing was max mana pool. She didn't have the ability to Nova Frostbite ulti. That sucked, right? But now, you could in some ways justify just like maxing Nova Frostbite Arcane Aura. I mean, you probably should do that build anyways. You should go like 4-4-4-1 in a lot of cases. But the lower cooldown on Nova and Frostbite, man, you're going to be able to kite people like crazy now. You could easily do like Frostbite Nova ulti, wait till that's done and then cast again. Or like Nova Frostbite back out and wait for the cooldowns. Like the cooldowns are just so low now. And actually level 1 Frostbite with level 1 Nova puts them on the same cooldown. So if you go 4 Nova, 1 Frostbite, same cooldown, 9 seconds each. So now your rotations are a lot more straightforward. Nova Frostbite, run away. Then come back again and do another Nova Frostbite. It's going to make a huge difference. But maxing out Arcane Aura, god, that's just so much mana over time now. You could actually farm like crazy now. What if you go like a 1-1-4 build? That's not worth it, I don't think at all. That's actually not worth it. You could jungle like crazy, I guess, but I don't think that's really justifiable. I'd still probably go like 4-1-1, or I'd go like 0-1-2 into 4-1-2. Max Arcane Aura, max Frostbite, 1 Freezing Field. There's a lot of opportunities for CM though. I think she's a little bit better. Oops, I don't want my calculator. I wanted this. Alright, Dazzle Poison Touch cast range has increased. I like that. It made the ability kind of bad. Even though the mana cost was low and the ability was decent at level 4, the fact that the cast range was so close meant that you'd had to get way out of position to cast it in teamfights. So if you have any way to get HP on Dazzle now, it's absolutely worth it to max out Poison Touch. Because 750 cast range is gonna make a lot of solve a lot of issues with the hero. You could also potentially justify. I think Dazzle with Aether Lens would be pretty good also to get this skill maxed out. In fact, in some ways, I think you could probably justify going like Dazzle, going like 4-1-4 into Aether Lens. As long as you get the Aether Lens fairly fast, it's going to make up for the fact that your grave range is a little bit lower. The cooldown will still be awful, obviously. But the early Poison Touch, if you can cast this, I think every 7 seconds or something like that. I'm pretty sure it's 7 seconds. It looks pretty good. I think it's 7 seconds at level 4. Yeah. 7 seconds, it applies a 1 second stun. 1 second stun, like, that's good. That's not bad. And it does a 66% slow and a 33% slow. It's not bad. Maybe I would go like 0-2-4, or I'd go like 1-1-4 and get a second Shallow Grave maybe. The first point is the worst. The best point is 3rd to 4th. Kind of the same for Poison Touch though. I kind of want to max out Poison Touch later as a Dazzle, honestly. With the range increasing, it's not putting you as much in danger. It's really making a big difference in a lot of these heroes. I really like that change. Alright, big changes to Death... not big changes, but changes to Death Prophet. Spirit Siphon no longer grants vision, thank god. It's still going to show you where it is because it shows you like the curve, like the path of where it's nuking. But the damage type goes from pure to magical. This had to happen because before it would counter all heroes. And it no longer goes through spell immunity, thank god. Because you used to be able to cast it on BKB targets. Cast on people before they press BKB, then they press BKB, it doesn't go away. A bunch of bullshit. It was way too good. But what they've done is they've adjusted the damage to be roughly the same as it did with Pure. So it does more damage now, but it's reduced by magic. So if you are a hero that resists magic, you are now less... Your Spirit Siphon does less damage to you. This is a big deal because now you can actually in any way prevent it. Before there was literally no counter. You couldn't counter Spirit Siphon. You couldn't. It did pure damage and it goes through magic immunity. Those are like 2 ways that you can counter it. Either by buying magic resistance or by getting a BKB. Now you can counter it by, for example, getting magic resistance. You can buy a BKB. Those are your solutions. Now they're there. But to offset all this, they also do increase the duration from 5 to 6. So this means that the skill is actually better in the laning stage than it used to be. With the exception that it no longer grants vision. It's definitely better in the laning stage. It's better. It lasts more time, it does more base damage, and the percentage that it does is higher. It actually does more in terms of damage here, I believe. Because it does higher, it does 25 instead of 20. Technically, let's see what the actual numbers should have been. If it's 20 pure, that means we can multiply by, or divide it by 0.75 to figure out how much. So it should do 26.6 magic to be equivalent. So it does less damage there, but the percentage is better. So in the level 1 Spirit Siphon is worse damage-wise than it used to be. But the damage goes up by, or the duration goes up by 1 second, so it does more damage. I'm pretty sure it does 100% more damage at level 1. Level 4 does way more damage because it does 5.5% of your total HP rather than 4%. And again, it still lasts for 6 seconds. But the range has been reduced by 50, so it's easier to run away from it. And that's a big deal because if you're letting him Spirit Siphon you, it's doing a lot of damage. So that actually kind of makes up for the fact that the duration has been decreased or increased because it's easier to get away from it now. So honestly, I'm very pleased with the change of Spirit Siphon. I don't think this is a big nerf by any means. It just makes it less OP. That's it. And that needed to happen. It doesn't hardcore counter BKB heroes like it used to. It's not going to keep Death Prophet alive against a Juggernaut that's spinning on her. It's not going to keep her alive against a hero like Lifestealer or against all these other strong heroes in the late game. It needed to be changed like this, and I think it's still good. It's just a little bit worse to juke trees. It can be countered by some items, and the range is a little bit lower. But the duration has been increased, and the damage late game is good if they don't counter it correctly. So it's still a good item. I still think DP is good. Her base strength got reduced by 1, which means she has 20 less HP at level 1, but not the end of the world. I think she's still a good hero, honestly. Plus, Drum, one of her common item builds, is still good on her because it's mostly an int item and a strength item. Drum is mostly good on strength or int heroes who need mana pool. If you don't need mana pool, then it's kind of a weak item, but for DP, that's still good. So I think DP is still good, but she's not OP anymore. It's not like OP abusable. There's no solutions. There are solutions now. Disruptor Connect Field AoE is increased slightly. Dragonite Breathe Fire attack damage damage increased. So it does 35% attack damage reduction at all levels now, which I think is good. The Breathe Fire cooldown goes down to 11 at level 4, but it's higher at level 1. And the big one, base damage increased by 4. These changes plus Armlet, I really think that Dragonite is like the best early mid-game hero. And in fact, with that said, there's been so many early mid-game fights right now in Dota. Why don't people pick Dragonite more often? I feel like they frankly should. The only downside is that he's very ultimate cooldown based, like because obviously you need your ultimate for you to be a really strong hero, so you're kind of limited on your cooldowns. But the strength that he has with just like Armlet and level 10 right now is kind of crazy. It's really, really good. With 4 damage increased and all of this armor, like he's actually gonna be almost impossible to harass on a mid. Maybe not almost impossible, but he's gonna be way better mid. I could genuinely see Dragonite be picked more. Maybe he's not good against OD, but it's a good example of a hero. How much is Dragon Sun is like 100. I guess you can. It's not. It used to be less. Maybe I'm wrong. Draw Ranger Gust cast point improved, so you can cast Gust faster now. Earthshaker getting a couple nerfs. The Boulder Smash knockback speed reduced. So this means the speed at which the boulder flies is less. So it's gonna be harder to hit boulder smashes on people from far away. The base movement speed also reduced by 10, which is a nerf to general roaming heroes. Since Earthshaker does move around the map a lot, it's going to be harder for him to get where he needs to be faster. Earthshaker Scepter is reworked, which is good because the Scepter before was awfully boring. Now it gives you an ability to leap with Enchant Totem. It becomes a 900 range. That's a huge range, by the way. That's like really far. Ground target ability causes you to jump in the air and land at the target spot, casting Enchant Totem there. So you can use this, buy this instead of Blink Dagger if you want, or what you can do is buy it instead of Force Staff, which is more likely what people will start doing. If the Earthshaker's really ahead, they'll go Blink directly into Ags, whereas before they would always go Blink Force. But now they'll probably go Blink Ags Force or Blink Force Ags, most likely. Self-casting the ability to make it behave in the original form without jumping. So if you just double tap E or something, you'll still stun on the ground. So this is a pretty cool change. Really, really cool change. But you should always buy Blink first. It's, you know what? You maybe can justify buying Enchant Totem first, or Eggs first, because Enchant Totem's like a 4-second cooldown. That means you could blink every 4 seconds, whereas with Blink Dagger, you can only blink 12 seconds, and if you're not taking damage. Whereas this, now you can. You could Enchant Totem in, Echo Slam, Fissure, and then after like 2 seconds, you can Enchant Totem onto a cliff or some shit. This actually looks kind of OP. The fact that it's linked to such a low cooldown makes this potentially very, very OP. We could definitely see maybe core Earthshaker coming back into it, especially in offlane. I really think that we're going to see a little bit more Earthshaker because of this, but most likely as a 4 or as a core. But cool change. Elder Titan gets a pretty big buff to damage. Echo Stomp damage, keep in mind this does 2 sets of this, so it does 320 damage now. It's a very good damage. That's a level 4, and the grace period for waking units up with the damage is increased by a little bit. This means people will be able to react to your Echo Stomp a bit better. I think Elder Titan's pretty good right now, but he's mostly good against agility carries, so the fact that Spectre gets a nerf this patch makes me feel like he's still probably not going to get used. But I honestly personally like Elder Titan a lot as a hero. I really like playing him. I don't know if he's necessarily good, but I think he's cool. And Enchantress, impetus damage decreased, sorry. by just a slight amount, 1% per times you level it up, and the max distance is decreased. So the maximum damage it can do is 385 instead of 625. So Enchant is still good at all stages of the game, with the exception of maybe there being creep nerfs later, but right now she's just a little bit worse. Enigma fixed demonic conversion, that's his second skill, not working on Beastmaster's Bororhawk, so another nerf to Beastmaster, but very small. Very tiny buff to Enigma, but other than that he's about the same, with the exception of maybe some item changes. Time Walk, Void got kind of buffed towards a carry, I think, basically. Time Walk cast range increased. Cast point increased, which means it takes longer to cast a spell, so it's harder to get out with Time Walk. Time Dilation cooldown increased, which really needed to happen, because Time Dilation, man, it was just way too good. It used to last, it's not going to say it. It used to be 18. Oh, it used to be 18, but the uptime was 12. So basically it would have 12 out of 18 uptime, which was way too much. I still think the AoE was too big, personally. But it's now 12 out of 22 instead of 12 out of 18, which is way better. So now it's 10-second cooldown instead of, after it runs out, instead of a 6-second cooldown. That really needed to happen. It was, like, against heroes that have low cast times, it was way too good. The slows also changed, so it's 8 at all levels now instead of being 10 at level 4. So it slows far less than it used to. It used to be way too good. The skill was real OP. Time Lock no longer does double damage inside Chronosphere, but it crits for up to 125 now. That's really good. This is pure or magic damage, by the way. So level 4 Time Lock does way more damage. It makes Void basically like better outside of Chronosphere, which basically means he is a better carry now. I think this is a good direction to take him. This is a big buff in my opinion. This didn't matter, and this is a nerf to the skill, but the skill's still good. So I think he's still going to get played. He won't necessarily get played as a carry still, but I think these overall changes are good. And Scepter no longer increases his duration, which I like a lot, because it would be like 6 seconds or something. Now it's 5 seconds no matter what. The duration was way too high with Eggs. Eggs is still a good item if you're playing offlane Void, but it's less good than it used to be. Gyrocopter Eggs reworked. He gets a side gunner which fires an automatic attack at random enemy units within 600 AoE every 1.4 seconds. 1.4 seconds is like, it's pretty long. And it's a cool change. It's kind of like Rocket Barrage, basically, just attacks out randomly. It has the potential for being purchased, because it does increase your DPS, by the way. If you have a lot of attack speed and a lot of damage items, this is not very amazing. But you could potentially argue for a Gyrocopter that buys just damage and Ags, maybe with SNY as well. So I think it doesn't... I don't know if it applies like your orbs or your lifesteal or whatever, and you'll probably still buy SNY in this hero, I think, even though it's a little bit worse on range units. You still want the stats and the movement speed though, but I kind of like this as an option. I think it actually has some benefit. It does work while you're stunned, by the way, but it doesn't work while you're invisible or disabled by break. So, and it does work with like disruption and stuff. So this could definitely be potentially good. Honestly, it definitely could be good. It wouldn't be good against like heavy summon armies, because then it's not going to be hitting a hero probably. But I like this change. It's going to make Gyrocopter more focused towards moving, like with Rocket Barrage, for example, and he will still attack, but I kind of like this change. I think it's pretty cool. I don't think we'll see Gyros build it. It's still 4,100 gold, but it's an option, and it's a much cooler version of Eggs, I think. Base damage also reduced by 4, so he's a little bit better, or a little bit worse at lane. His base damage is now really bad, actually. Huskar Berserker's Blood max attack speed increase, so that's at all levels. So Huskar is just across the board better at damage. Invoker nerfs. Invoke spells cast point increased, so before to cast an Invoker spell, it's instant. Now it has a very, very slight change. So this basically means you can't instantly Tornado after being banished, for example. If there's like an Ice Path down, you're going to get hit by it. This may seem like a very inconsequential thing, but it really does matter. The win rate for PLs, for example, decreased pretty drastically just by getting the cast point increase to his Doppelganger. So I like that. You can Dispel Cold Snap, of course, like we saw above. That's really needed. Ghost Walk cooldown is increased. Tornado Vision is reduced. I like this. It basically forces the skill to be more the skill to be more skill based. You have to actually target in where you want to see, rather than just throwing it out and seeing like half the map, which is what it was kind of like before. Forge Spirit health and mana has changed from Exort Quas to Quas Exort. So what that means is now the health of your Forge Spirits is now based on how many Quas levels you have. So if you have 4 Quas and 7 Exort, your Forge Spirits have HP, but not a ridiculous amount of HP. And because that was kind of the problem before. As soon as you get 4/4, you get 2 Forge Spirits, and then you'd max out your Exort, and all of a sudden your Forge Spirits are running around with 900 HP. Now, If you are only level 11 or something, your Forge Spirits are going to run around with about 400 HP, which is actually manageable for a lot of heroes. So this was actually this was a very, very smart way to fix the Forge Spirit problem, because they're very good at pushing. They're still going to do a lot of damage, but now they won't be able to survive pushes as well. So they're a little bit worse at split pushing in the mid game. In the late game, they should still be strong, but this is just such a beautiful way to fix the problem. The only difference is that now they have a lot more mana to lower your armor in the mid game. So the more they attack you in the mid game, they will drain your mana more. So they have less HP, but if you let them attack you endlessly, they're going to further reduce your armor. Whereas before, they'd have mana problems, because them reducing your armor is based on their mana. He also got nerfed on to base int, so this is a reduce of 6 base damage, which is a lot, and he loses a lot of mana pool. So 2 things of which he kind of needed to be nerfed on. He's going to be pretty bad at Quas Wex now, unfortunately, because of the base damage nerf and a 1v1, but on the bright side, for Exhort, less mana to cast Sunstrikes, Cold Snaps, all that stuff. Overall, I think this needed to happen on Evoker. Most of these nerfs are not that severe. This one is a good feature, this one is a good thing, and this one is very needed. This was the biggest nerf to him that I think balanced it a lot. And this one, this is arguably a bigger nerf, but this is also pretty significant. Jakiro Macropower distance increased. Oops, that's my bad. You know what? No, I need to do. I need to do this. You know what? This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna turn this off for just a second while I mute my Skype. Sorry about that. That's my bad. Okay. Macropower distance increase. So you can cast it from 1400 away. That's really far. I kind of like this ability now. I mean, it's 220 mana to cast it. The range is huge. It lasts for like 5 seconds. It's no longer unit targetable. Doesn't matter. If anything, this is better because this allows you to position it better in crazy team fights. And the scepter duration increased from 20 to 30 seconds. It lasts for 30 seconds. You could genuinely just Roche with Jakiro Ags now. It's actually incredible. In fact, how much damage does that do? Let's find out. GQ. I don't know why I don't use this in-game heroes thing every time I do a patch, but I clearly should, guys. Oh, thank you. It destroys trees in his path. Thanks a lot, Dota. I really appreciate it. Oh, it says right there. My bad. I'm being an asshole. 225 damage per second with Ags, which now that Roche takes 55, since he has 55% mana magic resistance, that means this is literally, oops, it's not working because I'm not tabbed in. 225 times what, 0.45, I guess. So Roche will take 100 damage a second. Are you serious? I swear to God I turned it to D&D. Alright, I swear to God. Alright, that's it. Sign out. Screw you, Skype. You messed up. So this does 100 damage per second to Roche for up to 30 seconds. That's some cheese, guys. 3,000 damage. Oh my God. Is this the new Jakiro build? You get Ags and then you just macro Pyre Roche? That's honestly not bad. That's like, you could actually pick Core Jakiro, build an Ags, pray to God the enemy heroes stand in it. Let's go find that Roche. So your HP 8,000. That's not bad, guys. That's really not bad. Can you Veil Roche as well? If you can Veil him as well, sounds pretty good. Well, I mean, I really do like that this is being buffed. Keep in mind that the Macropower distance is already really long with Ags, but I don't know, man. I kind of like this. If you take fights in the right places, Macropower is incredible, really. If you catch somebody in a place that's like a lane, it's just abusive. That might be hard to do, but I really like this change. Macropower is such a cool ability, but it's just so bad. But it's getting towards a position where it can be useful. Like, you can even justify casting this as a support, I think. On Roche, how long does it last for? 10 seconds and it does 100. This would do 45 damage times 10. It does 450 damage to Roche. That's not really worth using, I don't think. But it's not bad. 10 seconds duration. Does 1,000 magic damage. Like, that's got some value, guys. Alright, Juggernaut. Healing Ward now follows Juggernaut by default. Doesn't matter. Movement speed for Keeper Light increased by 20 because he has a horse. I think that's a pretty cool change. Here's very squishy. If people get on top of him, it's hard for him to get away, but it's going to be better now. Kunkka Torrent damage is now dealt evenly over 8 ticks. Previously, half of the damage was dealt at the start, and the other half is dealt evenly over 10 ticks. Torrent mana cost is reduced at low levels, and base armor increased by 2. This one's pretty big. These other things matter very little. With the exception of Torrent level 1, I guess you can roam a little bit better as him. Actually, quite a bit better, especially because your armor is better. Before, Kunkka, I believe, had 2 base armor, something like that. Now it's going to be way higher. Playing support Kunkka, definitely much better. How do I see my base stats? My stats. Oh, this is like in-game stuff. Oh, this is kind of cute. I've literally never looked at this before. Oh, pips, that tells me things. I'm not gonna load up a demo here just to show you guys, but I'm pretty sure his base armor is now 4, so he's gonna be a lot better at the mid lane. I'm sure that the guy that plays Kunkka all the time is gonna be really happy about 2, because if you're playing mid, this 2 armor is massive. 4 armor on Kunkka, man, way harder to kill now. He's always had really low agility and really low base armor, so low armor was definitely one of his problems. Legion Commander Duel no longer ignores disarm and ethereal states on either target. This really needed to happen. I couldn't believe it didn't work like this, because I guess you could buy E-Blade and counter him that way. But you can buy a lot of items and counter people. You can get a disruption. You can get an astral imprisonment. There's so many ways that should counter Legion that didn't. Like disarming Legion Commander, prevent her from attacking. That needed to happen, you know. I honestly think she needed this nerf for consistency purposes. It was like only stuns work. Is that really fair? Like all these other heroes have cool ways to stop people from doing stuff, but they just don't work. I like that this exists. It's kind of a big nerf to Legion that maybe she didn't need, but people don't buy E-Blade that often, and they don't buy the what's the name that often either. It's kind of a buff to Invoker, I guess. There's not a lot of other heroes that have Disarm. And the dual scepter duration increased as well. And this is the one that only allows you to do damage to your target and them to do damage to you. So it's kind of a big deal because 8 seconds late game that only you and them fight is pretty good. You can still disarm, ethereal, stuff like that, and probably stun Legion as well, but at the very least you won't be able to do damage to Legion. So it's kind of a cool thing. Sort of cool. Does that also mean, I can't remember how it works, but if I'm a support Legion I get Ags, does that mean I only take damage from the enemy carry, and my allies can't damage them, as well as they can't damage me? I think that would be the only way it's fair. Because it would basically just make you invulnerable in a lot of ways. Alright, Lich, Frost Blast, and Chain Frost, those are now independent debuffs. Thank God. It's fucking 2016 and this was now put in the game. The reason this never worked in the past was because the way that they coded skills in Warcraft 3 was they'd have to take an existing skill and code it a certain way. So even if it had a different name, it was still technically the same slow. So now when you Chain Frost and Frost Blast somebody on Lich, they're now ultra slowed. This is a huge buff to Lich actually. It really increases his solo viability because now he's not just the slow lasts 30% movement speed slow. And this is also a 30% movement speed slow. They wouldn't stack before. Now you can justify, if you're playing mid-lich or something, not that anybody's going to do this, but if you're playing mid-lich, you can slow somebody by 60% now for 4 seconds. That's pretty cool. Before, it was maximum 30. Do you see how fast that would scale off? In the mid-game, lich is only good for damage, basically, and frost armor. That's it. But now that they stack as a support, you can genuinely just throw that on whoever is the carry and actually slow them a lot, for example. That was much needed. This is all new, by the way. Everything I've read past here I haven't read yet, so this is all first impressions for 25% of the patch. Chain Frost no longer jumps to zombies. That was actually really needed also. That really hurt Lich so much. If it jumps to zombies and creeps, too much. So pretty good Lich buffs, actually. Pretty darn good Lich buffs. They're not huge, but Lich is still pretty good at where he's at. I like Lich as a hero right now. I think he's in a good spot. And this change was huge, in my opinion. This affects literally every game. And this one is just a kind of quality of life occasional rare thing. This one is honestly so big. It basically means if you get a good Chain Frost Nova, they get wrecked. Imagine 2 heroes standing next to each other. Before, they would be slowed by 30% movement speed. Now, if they both get hit by it, 60%. Good luck getting away from that shit. It's actually going to be so much better. I guarantee you guys. I'm so happy about this. It lets Lich get good Chain Frost. If your opponents are dumbasses and standing close together, your Chain Frosts are now amazing. Whereas before, they'd be good, but you'd only get 3 bounces or 4 bounces or something. Now, if they're really close together, you don't have to rely on an ally to further slow them to get a really good combo off. I'm actually so happy about this. Really cool change to Lich that allows so much skill cap. It gives you these these peaks on your playability where you're not just like average Lich. Here's Lich's range. Now it's like, oh, if you play your Lich really well, you can do really well. And if your opponents are really stupid, you can also play really well. So now the Lich range is just so much bigger. This may be OP, maybe it's too good, but I think it's good. If they're really grouped up, it can be really abusive. I love that. I'm so happy about that. Did I mention that? Lifestealer. Infest can now only target Ancients with level 2 and level 3. Praise Jeebus. This is so good. Like, it was just too good before. As soon as Lifestealer hits 6, he gets an Ancient that's equivalent to like a level 15 hero in terms of HP. And his right click was a little mediocre, but you could farm too well with this. This needed to get changed. In a lot of ways, I don't see people using an Ancient anymore at level 2 and level 3. I think that Radiance build is essentially gone now. I just don't see it being viable anymore because the most abusiveness was definitely the early to mid game. And now because you can't abuse your items in an ancient way at the start of the game, there's no point to go like Tranquil's Radiance now as an early game lifestealer for the aim of the mid or late game. It could be a potential thing, like buying Radiance on lifestealer in the late game is now potentially viable because you could do ancient stuff. But this is a pretty big nerf to that, and I think it needed to happen. It was a little bit too good. It was basically just real cheesy. It needed to be changed. Strength growth was increased on the hero though, and this is a good way to offset it. It lets you play him in a regular carry way. 0.6 strength per level is quite significant, and the math is easy because now we can multiply it by 20. So this is you get an extra 12 HP per level. So by level 10 you have an extra 120. This is big. This is a lot. This is a huge strength increase, and that's an increase of damage. So over 10 levels you get 6 more damage, but you also get. Did I do the math? Should be 0.6 times 20 is this times, we'll say 10 levels is 120 HP. Duh. 120 HP, 6 damage. That's pretty big. For a strength hero who has fairly low armor, I think this is a good solution to him because he's got low armor. Oh, he's even better now though because Armlet. Lifestealer is actually going to be a potentially really good carry right now, honestly. Armlet gives you 10 armor when you activate it. 5 without. Your HP has just gone up by a lot per level. I think Lifestealer is going to get pushed a bit into viable range. And this really was his weakness. Died too easily of physical damage. And obviously gets kited. But SNY also got buffed. So Lifestealer is pretty good. Armlet SNY on Lifestealer right now. This may be one of the new carries. Lifestealer right here. And it may seem very small. But the Armlet buff plus this one makes a huge difference. 5 free armor. A place where he was lacking. Like literally free. He already had it before. It's free. 100% free. Lifestealer basically got 5 free armor. And now he gets a huge strength growth buff. So, this looks really good for Lifestealer. Good for him. Lone Druid, Spirit Bear's Entangle now uses pseudo-random distribution. Talked about that before, same thing. If the bear hits 10 times in a row, he's gonna frickin' proc. I thought that it used that before, but I guess I was wrong. I could have sworn it was pseudo-random. Maybe they used a different kind of distribution that had a different name, but I thought it was on pseudo, but apparently it wasn't. Now it is. It's back on pseudo. Battlecry damage reduced. This needed to happen. This skill is way too good at level 1. Gave you an increase of like 180 damage between your bear and your hero. Keep in mind, I think the bear doesn't do hero-based damage. It does basic damage. So I think that means it does less to Mortar Towers, I believe. No. Less to Roche. Among other things. Maybe less to heroes. Yeah, less to heroes for sure. It does. But either way, this was a little bit too good. I like that they reduced the damage component, left the armor the same. The damage is just way too high. And it's still pretty good late game, which is fair. But the early game one was just way too significant. It used to scale like 60, 90, 150, and then they're like, let's make it 90. And I was like, oh my god, this does 90 damage. That's so good. But I like these nerfs. I think they're appropriate. Luna agility growth increased by 0.5. Not super significant. Over the course of 10 levels, you're getting 5 damage and almost no armor. I guess the armor is pretty nice. But I still don't think Luna will be played. There's still some value in her Ags. I think her Ags is still very good. But it's kind of situational. And keep in mind, her Axe gives you slightly more mana, less HP now. So I think that build has some merit, but other than that, as a carry, there's just a lot better carries than her. But maybe she'll come back in the meta, because everybody talks about like early fighting carries. But Eclipse is just a little hard to use, is the problem. We'll see. Magnus base each HP regen increased by a very marginal amount. This is a slight buffed offlane Magnus. Base damage increased by 4, so just overall better as a mid hero. Some people do play him right now. Medusa, maybe I do remember some of these. Maybe I skipped over stuff. I must have skipped over some stuff. No, I didn't. I remember what happened. I was sitting next to Blitz, and I was reading the start of the patch, and he was like reading the later part of the patch. We almost missed our flight, by the way. We literally got to San Fran, and we had like an hour between our transfers, and it took a while to go through customs, and we're sitting there in chairs, sitting at our gate, and we're just reading the patch. And then I'm like, I heard them talk about boarding, and then I just zoned out, because I was like, I'm reading the patch. And then they're called Final boarding for Ontario. I'm like, oh my god, we almost missed our flight. I was like, guys, we have to go right now. So we all get up and get on the plane, and like everybody's boarded. There was like one guy after us by like 2 minutes, but we almost missed our flight because we were reading the patch notes. Anyways, Blitz was skipping ahead and telling me stuff, so that's why I know some of these. I missed others. Maybe, because I remember some of these. Stone Gaze damage amp increased to 50% all levels. This is physical, by the way, and they're immune to magic while that goes on. So to compensate that, the slow is reduced. I actually like that they reduced the slow. The slow is way too good. It was like you just can't fight Medusa when she activates her ultimate, but now at least you can actually run away a little bit. It forces her to have better ults, basically. She has to ult when your opponent's engaged. Now, if she activates it and you run away, it's not as significant. 35% slow is semi-manageable. 50 is like crippling. The duration is rescaled as well, so a little bit worse at level 1. I think this honestly needed to happen. The skill was very balanced around being kind of a 1-point wonder ultimate. You didn't really need to level it up because it was pretty much good at all levels. The only thing that changed was this. The percentage damage increased, but now they're forcing you to put skill points into it for the extra duration. And you could still probably argue that 1 point is enough, honestly. But you kind of want the duration to be high because they need to look at you for a certain amount of seconds to stone form. So this duration increasing is actually quite important. But I like this. It forces Stone Gaze to be more skill-based, and it really increases your physical right off the bat, which is kind of a nice way to compensate that other nerf. Base damage increased by 4. Don't care. Scepter to Mirana passively triggers Starstorm every 8 seconds. If there's no units to affect, the spell waits until there's a nearby enemy. And doesn't trigger if the enemy does not see you. Passive procs are disabled by break. So, kind of a cool change. I think this is good if you are playing a roaming Mirana or a split push Mirana. It allows you to now split push a Mirana because every 8 seconds you get a free 300 damage nuke. And if you hit that on a hero, it does, I believe, 575, something like that, or 525. So the way Starstorm works right now is that it does 300 damage, but the 425 radius, which is really far, by the way, now gets hit second time for 75%. So, if we do that, we'll do 300. Oops, you're not seeing this either. 300 times 1.75, because that'll assume a Starstorm hits and the extra 75. So you're doing 525 magic damage every time you Starstorm somebody and get the second hit. With the Ags, keep in mind that it doesn't hit if there's nobody by. You could literally leap from trees on top of somebody, cast Starstorm. You could probably arrow from trees, leap in as the arrow goes through, cast Starstorm. And if you do that, you hit them for 1,050 damage if you have Ags. It essentially does minimum 300 damage, maximum 525. That's better than a Dagon. Plus it AoE, so this means you're doing minimum 600 AoE damage with the Ags. With the Starstorm cast. And it gives you mana. I honestly think this is potentially viable. I don't like it as a carry item because it's not going to scale very well. But in some ways you can also look at it as a Midas. I talked to Blitz about this. He thinks it's bad. I think it has potential. As a roaming Mirana, the value that this gives you is pretty darn good because most of the time when you're playing roaming Mirana, you don't really know what you're buying. But imagine if you get like a bottle, for example. Most Miranas buy Arcanes right now because it gives you unlimited arrows, and the arrows generate you gold and experience. You can still get Arcanes, potentially, and in some ways you kind of have to, especially as a support, because you would just run out of mana too much with bottle alone. But if you can go Arcanes into Ags on Mirana, that sounds pretty good. Because all of a sudden, it means every 8 seconds, you can literally walk by a creep camp and farm it faster. 8 seconds is not that long. That means you could spend 16 seconds on a neutral creep and kill it, most likely. Because you're talking about minimum 3, well, depending on what camps. If there's like a Centaur or something, it'll die kind of slow. But I honestly think this is not that bad. It's going to increase your mana by a lot, 10 int, plus the 175 that the point booster gives you. It's going to increase your HP by a good amount. It's going to give you a tiny amount of damage. But the HP is the biggest thing, and the amount of acceleration it gives you is just free. It gives you free acceleration. It's kind of like a Midas. That's what's cool about it. It's free acceleration and it's free damage in team fights. This honestly could add up to be a lot in the course of a team fight. I think it's a possibility as a split pusher as well if you're playing offlane Mirana. You can push lanes so fast now. You walk up to a lane and you Starstorm it, and the whole creep wave dies instantly. You do 600 damage to the whole creep wave. You walk up to a creep wave, it dies. You could literally go like Blink Ags or Ags Blink, something like that on Mirana. It just seems viable to me. For straight DPS, it's bad. If you're playing Kara Mirana, it doesn't sound that good. But the way that Mirana should always be played and how she's kind of played as a core is you do a gank/team fight into kills with nukes into finally getting items. And this could be the piece that allows you to do that. When we talked about yesterday, I was like, yeah, that sounds kind of bad. But if there's no units to affect, the spell waits until there's a nearby enemy. The only problem to this is that it may force you to always leap into a creep wave. Because if you walk up to a creep wave, then it's going to cast when there's like one unit around. You don't want that. You want to cast it when there's all units. So you may have to leap into a creep wave. This is why Blink might be good, because then you could blink into the creep wave, double Starstorm, boom, whole creep wave dies. And you could just do that. You could walk through the jungle. You could use your ultimate. You could cut creep waves. There's a lot of really good ways that this accelerates your farm. It doesn't force you to get a Maelstrom. When you have Maelstrom, you can clear a creep wave with Starstorm and a couple right clicks really fast. But now, instead of spending that 2,700 gold on the Maelstrom or whatever the heck it costs, maybe you spend 4,100. You know, maybe... Oh, I don't want items. I want items. How do I do that? What the heck? Alright, I literally have no idea how this works anymore. Support? Clear filters? Can I just look at items? I don't know how to do that anymore in Dota. That's weird. Whatever. I think this has some potential. If roaming Mirana is doing well, I would definitely say buy Ags. 100%. It's going to translate into damage. You're going to get minimum 300 damage to a hero in a creep wave. Think about the counter push as well. If you just get like, if you had like Ags Blink Mirana, you could literally like blink and cast Starstorm and turn and leap. And boom, 600 magic damage minimum. Like, I think this is potentially good. You're going to see it in pubs 100%. Mirana's going to be played more in pubs and people will rush this. I wouldn't do it as a carry Mirana, like a safe lane Mirana. But you probably shouldn't safe lane Mirana anyways, so. But I honestly think this is cool. I would do it roaming Mirana and offlane Mirana. Maybe dueling, something like that. It's kind of hard to make that work though, so I don't know, maybe it doesn't work. But I like this idea. Really cool. Really cool eggs. Morphling, replicate damage dealt increase. This means your ultimate illusion is now pretty viable as a carry. You could actually spawn this more often as a carry Morphling. The only downside is that if you pick Morphling, you kind of don't want to pick another hard carry to make an illusion of. So if anything, this is a buff to offlane Morphling, mostly because then you can make a replicate of your carry and deal damage with it. So you'd want to synergize it with somebody else that does damage, like Spectre, PL, maybe a Alchemist with a Radiance, for example, and your illusion is actually going to hit pretty hard. Or you could take like a Lifesteal or turn Armlet on and make an illusion of him. Obviously, Lifesteal does a lot of damage from Feast, but it's not bad. It's going to take full damage from your opponents, and it's going to deal 80%. You can farm with it. You can do a lot of stuff with it. I like this change. The hybrid cooldown reduced from 120 to 70. This is also needed. Hybrid was the Ags that Morphling gets. The cooldown is much lower now, so you can use it more often and actually justify it for things like stuns rather than just for like Tombstone and stuff. So this is a pretty big buff to offlane Morphling, I think. Offlane, go Tranquils, Midas maybe, into Yules, and go around stunning people a lot, and then eventually get in Ags. And then with the Ags, you can basically you can make a hybrid of a Vengeful Spirit, for example, and you can use Wave of Terror and Magic Missile, or you could make a hybrid of a Lina, for example, and double stun. There's a lot of heroes this could potentially be really good on. Axe, it could be really good. What if you did Morphling Axe with an Axe? Axe could blink in, he could Battle Cry. You could then make a replicate of that Axe, or a hybrid of the Axe, and then Battle Cry again to stun for another 3 seconds, all the while spinning, doing damage, casting Battle Hungers with it. There's a lot of things that this could potentially be really good on. I wouldn't necessarily like Brewmaster, but what about like Bristleback? You can make a Bristle hybrid and like do more Bristle damage if they attack you. They won't attack you though. Centaur Warrunner, you can make a Centaur Warrunner hybrid and just start double edging like crazy. 6 seconds, double edge, 6 seconds, double edge, 6 seconds, double edge. With Stomp. Like there's honestly some viable heroes. 70 seconds makes that legit a possibility. But 120 seconds, what's the point? That's like a big teamfight ultimate for basic skills. The only reason that worked before is because you would have to get a hero that had a basic skill that was like an ultimate, like Undying. But 70 seconds, that's every team fight. You can justify that. Morphling, support, and or offlane, definitely possible, I think, with that build. But you kind of have to go Midas. You go Midas into Ags or Midas into Yules, I think. I really like that change, though. I definitely am going to try this in pubs now. Naga Siren, Mirror Image Illusion Duration. God, I love Dota. I love patches. I'm so excited to play Dota right now. Mirror Image Illusion damage increase, so better at all levels by 5%. I think this is needed. Naga's kind of in a bad spot right now, and she doesn't carry very well. She kind of has to do this Radiance bullshit, which is kind of annoying. She's just kind of outdone by heroes like PL, so I like this change overall. Not to mention there's the whole armor increase by towers, so doing tower diving is harder. Killing towers is kind of hard right now. Song of the Siren Scepter regen rate increased, kind of irrelevant. Although it lasts for 8 seconds, you could heal potentially 80% of somebody's HP instead of... I still don't think this is very good, because most of the time you don't want to ulti in the middle of the team fight, but... It now affects units like golems. Okay, could be good for pushing. You could maybe see it justified that way. Treant bounty has gone up because Nature's Prophet is OP, and this is the big one. The vision is reduced by a lot. It's kind of the same thing as all this, the Tornado vision, the Beastmaster vision. Make it harder to use correctly. You have to put your treants in the perfect spot. You can't just put them at literally like 1,000 vision at daytime is quite a lot. 800 at night is the same as all heroes. 500 though, that makes it limited. You can see treants and you can actually walk around them now. It's going to force prophets to place them better, to have them maybe on patrol paths and stuff. Increases skill cap, all good things. Necrophos, Reaper, Scythe respawn time penalty reduced at all levels, except for the last one. This is good. Level 1 Reaper shouldn't just like make somebody dead for like double the time they're dead. 10 seconds is fine. I don't care about getting Reapered at those points. It does increase the nuke though. It did a very low amount of damage before. Let's say you're a 900 damage or you're 900 HP hero. It's early in the game. And you're missing 500 HP. Well, let's see. How much damage does that do? 500 times 0.4. It's a 200 damage nuke. It's fucking awful. You're missing like 500 out of 900 HP. That's like a massive amount. That's over 50%. And it does a 200 damage nuke. That's terrible. 200 damage nuke. That's like a level 2 to 3 nuke. That's terrible. But now 500 times 0.6. It's actually the level 2 nuke now. It does 300. That's what it should be. If somebody's missing 600 of their 900 HP, which is pretty average for like a level 1 Reaper Scythe. It's like a level 1 nuke. It's now going to do a level 1 nuke. That's what it should have been this whole time. It should have been reasonable damage. Before you'd have to be at like 20%. Let's go back to easier numbers. 1,000 HP. Let's say you're down to 200 HP. You're missing 200 of you're missing almost all of your HP times 0.4. Would this even kill you? And then we'll multiply this by 0.75. It barely kills you. It does 40 more damage than it would take. So you'd have to be at like 25% HP for Reaper Scythe in the past to kill you. It's awful. Now it's much better. This is balanced. I think this is a great way to put... Maybe it's not balanced, but it puts Necro in a much better range. Especially because now his ultimate actually does like a fairly even range of damage. Before, like the ranges were so big that nobody like had a good concept of how much Reaper Scythe level 1 actually did. It did awful damage, basically. Like, Necro could never soul kill somebody. To soul kill before, you'd have to get 2 Death Pulses off, and then Reaper Scythe. Now, you can Death Pulse once, Reaper Scythe, and then Death Pulse them, probably, and kill them. Huge difference. It's going to completely change Necro's viability as a potential 1v1 hero, and potentially as a carry as well. But mostly as a 1v1 hero. He's way better at 1v1 with this change, and it doesn't come at the cost of, like, making people hate life and hate the game. I love this change. Really cool change. And again, like I said, these numbers are a lot closer, so everybody's going to have a better feel for how much Reaper Scythe is going to do. And I think that's a big change. To do some general math, let's do 600 times 0.6. So if they're missing 600 HP, you're doing 360 damage, times 0.75 is 270. So every 600 HP, what's like an easier version? Let's start with, let's say 300 damage. And we're going to divide it by 0.75, 400, and then we're going to divide this by 0.6, I think, because we're basically undoing all the math I just did. So 300 damage. Okay, so for every 666, literally the number of the devil, for every number of the devil of HP they're missing, you do 300 damage. I think that was what I just calculated. That's actually pretty straightforward. I'm really glad I did this. Let me just double check this. So we're going to multiply it by the 0.6, and then we're going to multiply it by 0.75. So literally the number of the devil, for every number of the devil they're missing, you're doing an average nuke. So you guys can calculate that in the future. You can click on their hero and be like, they're missing slightly over 600 HP. I'm expecting a 300 damage nuke out of Reaper Scythe. I'm really glad I did that. This is reasonable. This is awful. Really didn't like this number. People were still trying some Necrophos out in games and stuff, but it just wasn't very good. Nyx fixed Spike Carapace not preventing damage when a spell immune attacker damages you. This is a good, valid change. And the base HP regen is again increased to 3.5. Bugs apparently regen like crazy. He does have armor on him, so maybe that makes sense, but Nyx a bit better as an offlane. I still wouldn't justify him as a support, because you still need levels a lot and you're kind of limited for a while, but He'll be a slightly better offlane. You could also justify this as an OD nerf. Omni Knight, Degen Aura no longer pierces spell immunity. I think that's fine. Very, very small nerf to the hero. Won't matter in the pro scene. Will affect pubs for sure. It'll affect a little bit in the pro scene, but Omni Knight's almost never picked. Scepter to Oracle, this one's pretty cool. Reduces Purifying Flame's cooldown from 2.25 seconds to 1, and lowers the cast point from 0.3 to 0.1. Now, the cast point one's pretty big, because if the cooldown was 1, but the cast point was 0.3, that means 30% of the time that you're casting Purifying Flames, you're standing still casting Purifying Flames. Instead, 0.1 is such a low cooldown. You could, and now, if you that's my phone, sorry. If you ulti somebody now, you could potentially cast Purifying Flames like 3 times and make it worth it. Let's do some math on this. This is going to be good. If I could find the hero. Alright, here's Oracle. So, do I need a spreadsheet for this? I'm going to spreadsheet. Be right back. See how this works, but I'm going to turn this off so you can see this. So I just basically calculated how much you healed over time. I could probably done this faster with like a program or some crap, but whatever. Just wrote this out. So the important thing to look at, this is basically me figuring out how many Purifying Flames you can cast without Ags. And up here you can see that you can only cast 4 total Purifying Flames without Ags. In fact, the 4th one doesn't actually heal you any extra, because you would cast at 7.65, then it would hit 8 seconds and the ulti would end, so you wouldn't get an extra heal. So technically, you can only cast for a maximum of 3 times without Ags, which will provide you a net negative 94 by the time the ult breaks. At 8 seconds, let me think, is that how it works? Because the bar is kind of confusing. This is the bar for healing, and this is the bar for... I think basically the important thing is here. Technically this bar should be here, but it's kind of confusing. Because basically like sometimes it heals you at like 8.4 for example, whereas the ultimate ends at 8. So basically the line is... This is kind of confusing that I put the line between 7 and 8, but this is... look for this one. This is the important column to look at, basically. This is what your total net heal or damage taken is as the ultimate ends, assuming it's 8 seconds. You could adjust this graph as well, but I individually... If I wrote this in a program, it would be way easier because I could adjust what level ultimate you use. But spreadsheet-wise, just let's assume this is assuming like a level 16 ultimate, more or less. I mean, that's not the best information to have, but anyways, look at it. So this is basically without Ags. This is each individual Purifying Flame. Your first that you casted, your second that you casted, and your third and your fourth. And then these are your summation totals, basically saying like how much would you have healed if you only casted 1 Purifying Flame, or 2 Purifying Flame, or 3, based on the time that the ultimate ends. So for example, if I don't have Ags and I cast 1 Purifying Flame, I heal a total of 302 before my ultimate ends, assuming I have a level 8 one. If I cast 2, then I heal a net of 472, because this number here is adding up, as you can see, both of these two. If I cast 3, then it adds up all 3 of these, and then it's going to be less because technically we're taking minus 94 damage. But over the course of the Purifying Flames, if we scroll to the right slightly, your total that you gain is actually 950. So by casting the third one, you overall will gain more health than you did in the short term, but in the long term you'll gain more, but in the short term it's not quite as much. So the important thing to look at is, and what this math tells me is, this lets me know which situations I want to cast 3 Purifying Flames on a hero without Ags, and which situations I want to cast just 2. Because you always want to cast at least 2. It's pretty much always worth it, it looks like. As long as you cast them right at the start of the ult, and then immediately again at the next point in the ult. So if you're level 16 on Oracle, you ulti a guy, you should always cast at least 2 Purifying Flames on them. I didn't calculate if you Fate's Edict the second one, and to do that would be pretty easy. I would just change this value to 0. That way, when it calculates it, it would be way higher. So hypothetically, you could do the first one, and the second you Fate's Edict and do it again, and then boom, they get maximum heal. But this is assuming you don't use that. Minimum, you want to cast 2, because it's going to heal you 472 after the ultimate ends. If you don't, it's only going to heal 302, so it's definitely better to double cast it. The third one is not worth it in the short term if you're worried about them dying while the ultimate ends. But if you're worried about a longer fight, if you think they're going to survive that, but they're going to take more damage later, then it's better to cast the third one. But it's only if you think they're going to survive the third one. If they take a ridiculous amount of damage during the ultimate, you want to stop at 3. Stop at 2, because that'll keep them alive. So it's kind of based on estimation of how much damage they take, but it will net them a total positive of 472. In the long term, though, you're going to heal them more like, 700 total with 2, and 950 with 3. And also, this is just calculating percentages of increasing whether or not you cast a second or third one. As you can see, casting a fourth increases your percentage of overall, but it has mostly negative effects for the short term because it only does 100. So pretty much when you don't have Ags, you always cast 2, sometimes 3. When you have Ags, then things get more complicated because then we're talking about a lot of different numbers. But as you can see, these are the timers that you can actually cast Purifying Flames. Up here, it's pretty spread out. The most important one is the third pip, which rounds you up over 5, which means that you've lost a second that you can heal before your ultimate procs. Whereas down here, it pretty much never happens. It never ticks you up an extra second until this point here, which would be after 7.8, but that doesn't matter. So when you have Ags, you can actually cast Purifying Flames a ridiculous amount of time more than you could before. And it's not just about the cooldown, it's also about the time or the cast animation. So if we look at the amount healed, these are each individual casts, how much they heal you over time. The best one's obviously the level 1. It will heal you a total of 434, but over time it becomes less and less because you're getting less benefit from the ult. So to look at the maximum amount of heal here, you can see that if you cast it a total of 5 times, 4 to 5 times, you're healing for a total of 850 extra on top of whatever they take. So it's a ridiculous amount. This is a ridiculous amount of heal. Over the total, you're talking about a difference of 14, almost 1500 and 1700. So you want to cast about 5 times total. You're essentially giving somebody about a cheese, more or less. You start getting diminishing effects in the short term with the 6th and 7th cast, but basically up to 5 casts, you want to cast 4 or 5 times, depending, for the short term, no matter what. No matter what, 4 to 5 times, if possible. And that's going to heal your ally for a total amount of 1500 or 1700. So if you're talking about a carry that can take a lot of damage but can also deal a lot during this time period, it is amazing to get Ags on them because your difference here is a difference of 800 versus a difference of is that it, 400? Yeah, basically 470 to 370. You're getting about twice as much heal on them during your ult, which is a big difference. And that's not even including things like mech. And that may be something to consider, by the way. If you get Ags, you can, yes, heal your ally a lot, but if you buy mech, I can just throw 225 or 250 heal on somebody, which is automatically getting them 500. And a mech alone costs, what, 2,300 gold compared to the Ags of 4,100. So, for example, if you don't get Ags, but you get mech plus like a 4-staff, it's probably better overall for heal, honestly. Because you're basically just adding 500 to all these numbers easily. Boom, add 500, all of a sudden you're healing for 900, and that's with less mana, and it's easier to cast by far. To not have to be like cast it again and then cast it again and then cast it again. Plus sometimes you're gonna miss some of these timing windows because you're busy stunned or busy with other stuff. So these numbers are gonna change. This is a perfect mathematical world. In almost all cases, getting a mech on Oracle is better. Almost all cases, the mech is better because the amount of heal that it gives you and your allies and everybody is so much better. For single target, even the same thing, you're getting double the heal. But without Ags, or with Ags, you can potentially do a lot of good stuff. Not to mention the damage you can do to your opponents is going to be really high, and you can debuff that. Actually, if you hit like 3 or 4 spells within 4 seconds, and then you hit the Purge on them, you've just done like a stupid amount of damage. I didn't calculate that, maybe I should have, because I was only thinking about the defensive applications. This is all defensive stuff. But basically, your glory point is 4 to 5 casts if you have Ags. Either way, you should still get mech. Offensively, your glory point is probably around 4 to 5 as well, I would guess. That you can basically instantly stop the extra heal, most likely. Probably 3 to 5, somewhere in there. But we're talking a lot of damage. Level 1 nuke does do 270 to your ally as well as 270 to your opponent. So we could do damage calculations as well, but I'm guessing it's around the same thing. Probably the same thing with your opponents. You should cast it probably twice on them and then purge it off. Unless you're going to kill them with 2 nukes, in which case you would cast right away. So that's pretty much everything you'll ever need to know about him. I'm going to minimize that, and we're going to go back to the Dota buff section. Where were we? That was probably at least an hour that I spent on that, but it was pretty fun. I've learned more about Oracle. So yeah, 2 times healing him if you're worried about the short term, whereas if you have Ags, you go long term. Looking at all those numbers, honestly, and then comparing it to mech, I don't think this is worth it defensively. It's really not. If you're ultra rich and you have mech and you're like, what do I buy next? Then yeah, buying an Ags is actually really possible. You could definitely justify that. If you're against a silence, you're going to want to go Arcane Mech into Guardian Greaves, after which you could buy Ags if you want to get more heal. It's a late game opportunity, but honestly, as Oracle, it just doesn't happen that often that you're going to be that rich. With that said, though, you could in some ways justify having Ags early, which transitions you into a farming potential to get more items, but I don't think that's worth it. It's 4,100 gold. Before you get that gold, your items are essentially worthless. You don't really need that much tankiness on Oracle, in my opinion. So I think that Ags is kind of bad to get first. If you're after Guardian Greaves, you can justify it, but I just don't see it as a justification. Maybe if you're playing core Oracle, if you're not worried about healing people, if you're just worried about damage, you could maybe play core Oracle, rush Ags, and then you can Purifying Flames like all the time. Like all the time. This super low animation is really nice too. You could constantly just chase people. You can basically just chase people down, constantly casting Purifying Flames. You cast it like 4 times, cast your first skill, and then continue to chase. It has some potential applications for a core Oracle, I believe. A damage dealing Oracle, but from support, don't get it, guys. Always get mech first. If somebody else gets mech, then maybe you can justify it, but even then you could have like Glimmer Force, and that's probably better. Or you could have like Earn Force. That's way better than getting an Ags as a support. So, now I've proven to you with math that it's not worth getting Ags if you are a support Oracle. Get mech. Alright, glad I looked that up. I think we got some important information out of that. If you guys want that file, I could potentially send it to you guys as well. Just send me a tweet or an email. Alright, OD, Arcane Orb Intelligence Steal reduced from 2345 to 1234. So he's way worse in the laning stage for stealing Int, which is very needed. The 2 Int was a little bit over extreme. And he's also got mana cost increase from at all orb levels, 100 to 160. So what this basically means is, in the early to mid game, his orbs are going to do exponentially less damage, and he's not going to be able to sustain his mana. That's 100% fact. He's also going to be able to farm ass fast. Because the way that it worked before is that your arcane orbs are always 100, so once you get enough aura levels, you can kind of endlessly orb. But you're going to have a lot more situations in the early to mid game where he can't just endlessly orb. His first couple of orbs are going to do a lot of damage, but I'd have to do a graph as well to calculate like what percentage of mana is he likely to sustain at, and but as he orbs, he gets more Int, which increases his mana pool, which increases the amount he gains from an orb, which also increases the amount of damage he does. It's like this weird, complicated graph that I wouldn't be able to do in a spreadsheet. Just wait till somebody that's more experienced with databases and math, graphing and stuff like that does it for you. But I could tell you for a fact that OD is going to have a lot more trouble casting more than 4 orbs in the early to mid game, and it's going to do less damage, and it's going to steal less Int. So this is a big early to mid game nuke or nerf to OD by far. Maybe he's still fine in the mid game when he's like 4-1-4 skill build, because he's still going to have a decent mana pool. But considering the items that OD are buying recently, which are basically HP agility Int item spreads, like Aquila, Drum, Treads, Wand, they're all like average items. They give a lot of stats everywhere. Whereas if you buy, I forgot my webcam's off. Whereas if you buy like big Int items like Hex, Shivas, stuff that you haven't normally seen on ODs recently, those are the items that give you so much mana that you'd probably for sure be able to endlessly orb. But you probably can't do that very nicely with the way that OD is set up here. So this is a pretty big early mid-game nerf to OD, and it may cost him a lot in terms of viability. But we will see. We do not know for sure. Astral Imprisonment also got a really big nerf. The cast range at level 1 is really low. So it's very good defensive, but you can't cast it on your opponent and lead up because they're going to be able to see it coming. In a lot of cases, people can avoid the 450 cast range. 225 is really bad. So this is a pretty needed nerf against OD. It's going to hurt his laning stage a lot. It's going to hurt his defense gank ability. And it's going to hurt his offensive setup a kill ability. Not to mention, of course, you're going to be limited on mana here for Arcane Orb. So I think overall this is going to hurt OD a lot. I think he's still viable, but part of the reason he was so beastly was because he was so strong early to mid game. And that I just don't think that's going to be the same unless we find a build or a build adjustment where that ends up working. But I think he's just going to have a lot of mana problems. Any fight that's a longer engagement, he could definitely get unlucky and just get screwed and output less damage and then just get killed, which is probably how he should have been based. But before, basically, if he had 4 points in Orb and 4 points in Aura, he'd never run out of mana, is essentially what would happen. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I haven't like specifically clicked on his hero and watched his mana pool during fights, but he just feels like he does a truckload of damage and he doesn't stop until everybody's dead or he's dead. And now he could actually just run out of mana and be like, I'm out of mana. Keep in mind that every time you cast an Arcane Orb, it lowers the amount of mana you have, and the lower your mana is, the lower the Arcane Orb does. So this also means that if you just get unlucky, he's going to do a lot less damage. He'll still steal Int, which is fairly important, but he's going to do a lot less damage every orb. So it's pretty important, because I think his orb does like, what, 9% of the remaining mana. So every time you orb and it doesn't work, you're losing like 5 pure damage or something. It's going to add up, guys. This is going to be pretty extreme, but we'll have to see more in math and play to figure out how bad this OD nerf is. Alright, pretty big PA change. Stifling Dagger now does a real physical attack for 60 plus a percentage of your attack damage. All attack effects work and behave as if your hero performed them. This is big. No more pure damage, but it gives you an auto attack, which means you have the chance to crit. So, this also means Deso, this means Lifesteal, this means Basher, this means Cleave, this means literally everything. I don't know if it counts as like Radiance Burn or something like that. It's probably not worth it because it only do like 1 tick of Radiance damage. It's not really needed, but this is cool because you could send out a Cleave. You can dagger the front of the creep wave, which would cleave the whole creep. You could get, I think one thing that might be really popular now is like Magnus with PA, because Magnus can empower PA. PA was already good with Empower. Now she's even better with Empower, because now her daggers will cleave damage. And if you get something like generic stat items on PA, it's going to synergize really, really well with the cleave. And maybe you'll see things like Desolator as well in PA, because now you can potentially single target crit somebody really hard with a minus armor. Especially because you're talking 70% of your attack damage. I don't think that's base attack. I think that's 60 plus 70. So if you're hitting for like 300, for example. Let's say you're hitting for average 300. That's pretty high. Let's say 80 plus a Deso, which is like 140. So we'll say 140 plus 60. You're talking about a 200 damage physical hit, which is pretty good, considering your dagger's on a very short cooldown. I was thinking as well, maybe something like Coddle PA would be kind of good too, because then you could double dagger. 6 seconds, I think that would work with level 4 Coddle, because Coddle's third skill does, I believe, 6 seconds level 4. I'm pretty sure. But if you can dagger for that, especially like a double dagger, it's so good. You could just dagger on somebody, and it slows them. You could like, you could also do it with Blink Strike, actually. It seems like it's a pretty cool combo, actually. Coddle with PA. You could dagger, Coddle thing, and then blink again after 4 attacks. There's a lot of abusive things you could actually do with it. And you could also do slows on top of Blast. I think it has some potential. It's weak against good like tri-lanes, I think, but I think in a dual lane it might be kind of cool. So maybe we'll see stuff like that come out. But this is going to basically act very similar to how Ember Spirit currently works. You will need Cleave for it to be effective, and I think it's more likely that we see Magnuses in this combo. But I think Magnum mid with a potential PA carry is definitely a possibility for lineups you'll see. Some people pick Magnus right now. It's just going to get a little bit better here, and the Magnus PA combo is good. I think this is a great way to change PA, because she's definitely a bad hero. She's just too limited based on people using like Ghost Scepter, and her early game builds are really crap. But now it's even worse because you can't get a drum, because the drum is not good on PA anymore. It gives you too much int and some strength and almost no damage. So I think it's going to be Aquila PAs with Wand for sure. That's going to be your early game build. Maybe you'll go into like a Deso or something like that. But you could definitely just one-shot people from range. If you go like a Deso build with generic damage items, you could just range crit them and one-shot somebody. It's pretty crazy. 70% plus 60. I guess if you're critting for like 1,000, we're talking more like 700 damage physical from a crit. But considering the dagger range, that's really potentially strong late game. If you're doing like a slow push, that's amazing. Or if you're slow push defending, it's amazing, because you could just get lucky on a support and like drop their HP by half. If you do that, then you blink in afterwards and kill them, like right at the start. A lot of people won't be able to react to that. They can probably Ghost Scepter, they can blink dodge it, but that's kind of limits you a bit. But I really like this change. It gives PA a lot more poke potential and a lot more teamfight potential without going all in, which is really where PA was limited, honestly. Very limited on that factor. In terms of the damage it deals, it used to do pure damage. It doesn't say anymore, obviously, because the thing updated. I don't know why I clicked on that. But I think it used to do 180 pure damage to heroes. I think it did like 60, 120, 180, 240 pure. And then it would do 120 versus heroes, I believe, pure damage. So it's definitely way better now, I think, especially late game. Mid to late game, it's way better against heroes. Way, way, way better. So cool change. His turn rates increase as well, so he can't run around and kite quite as well. He kind of, you know what this reminds me a lot of? It's kind of a lot like how PL used to play, where you throw in your ulti, or you throw in your nuke and nuke them. But obviously you can't get Radiance on PA. Otherwise this would kind of make sense. But I kind of like this change. It should allow PA to poke a lot more without having to commit to a team fight. I think that is a very, very good thing. Not to mention it's like a free, I guess it's not a free attack because you're still animating to cast the dagger, so it's not like you just get a free auto attack every 6 seconds. But I really like this change, very cool. You'll definitely see PAs maxing dagger no matter what. Not that they weren't before. What's the cooldown on that, by the way? Oh, it's always 6 seconds? I thought it decreased. I don't think we'll see PAs not max this out either way because the slow duration is still very good. But this will still last it very well. It'll last it a little bit worse than you used to, but at low levels. But late game, obviously, it's far better. All right, Phoenix Supernova Scepter now also increases the number of attacks needed to destroy the Supernova. I really like this. I think it's a good change. I believe before the Supernova was 5, 8, 11, and now it's 7, 10, 13. Sometimes those two attacks make all the difference. Like, just the difference between level 1 Supernova and level 2 is massive. It goes from 5 to 7, and you feel like you're invulnerable. But if you can get an Ags on top of that, you could justify this as a potential item build. I still think Aether Lens is still the build for Phoenix because the Sunray increase. The Sunray is still super OP. I'm actually quite surprised we aren't seeing Phoenix picked in the tournament. Nobody picked him. But I like this Ags as a possibility to dealing with people that just don't have that many attacks, or teams that do have a lot of attacks. The Shivas is still going to be superior to Ags for keeping you alive because it gives the attack speed aura. Not to mention you can do Shiva's Dive is really good for slowing. But I think this is a cool opportunity to make a support or an offlane Phoenix into a more important teamfight core. Kind of cool. I like it. Pluck will lose your orb speed by 1 is increased. I don't know how much that increases it, but it will be faster. A little bit of a Puck buff. A little surprised because Puck was picked a lot recently. But Nether Ward now treats illusions as creeps for hit count calculation. That's for illusions hitting your Nether Ward and counting as a hero. So Manto is like way too good against Tombs. Same as like PL. You could kill Tombs way too fast with it. So it's just a small buff to Pugna and Undying. Razor static link break distance increased by 100. That's pretty big difference for Razor. Decent buff to Razor. Ricky added Captain's Mode. Blink strike damage increased by quite a bit. A lot. Oh god, it's like way better at level 1. This is magic damage, by the way. It doesn't do physical when you Blink Strike, but with level 4, I believe the cooldown is going to go very, very low. Down to, it's like 4 seconds or something. That's really good. You can do 120 magic damage every 4 seconds. That's really good. Relatively good. It's not like a Dagon or anything, but I mean, that's not bad. That's going to do 90 damage after reduction. So I've seen some people do that build where they would go 1-4-1, leave Cloak and Dagger really low, but have a lot of Blink Strikes. And I kind of like that. I think I like a hybrid. I think I would personally do something like 1-2-2 with max Blink, or 1-3-3 might be good. But Blink Strike's not very good unless you max it. I don't like the third point. 8 seconds is okay, but not that great. I really like the fourth. For survivability and offensive purposes, like if you go 1-1-4, you do the most damage by far, like without question. But with a high level of Blink Strike, once you Blink Initiate, you don't have Blink ever again for the gank. But if you get 4 levels, you can Blink to initiate, do 120 damage, and then after they run away, after you've used Tricks of the Trade, you can Blink again. That's the good part about it. So I think something like a 1-4-2 build is probably the best on Ricky, no matter the way you play him. Especially if you're playing roaming support, you'll definitely max Blink Strike because it gives you free damage, and people aren't going to let you hit them in the back that often with Cloak. Obviously, it does work much better with Tricks of the Trade if you max the skill. So your overall AoE is weak, but your gank is better with Blink Strike. But I like that you can kind of adjust how you play him now. The cast points improved, which is good because that ability took way too long to cast, and the cooldown scales really well, which is good because the ability doesn't scale well late game. Because it doesn't scale based on your attack speed at all. It just still has pretty low attack speed. It still has low attack speed. It doesn't scale. It just still does damage scaling. Rubik Fade Bolt damage increase is what it used to be originally a long time ago, before like TI 3, TI 2, something like that. I guess it would have been TI 2. Now be playing IG. They nerfed it after that, so it's been like 3 years weak. So now it's a regular nuke again. It's a really good skill. Reduces damage by a lot, actually. I was kind of theory crafting about whether or not you should use it at level 1 in 5v5 teamfights at runes, because the damage that you decrease is actually massive. Lowers damage by 20 damage at level 1. It only does 75 damage, but is it worth it? Is it more worth it to lift for 1.5 seconds and potentially do an AoE 1 second stun, or on a 22 second cooldown, by the way? Or is it better to debuff potentially 5 heroes for minus 20 damage? Minus 20 damage at level 1 is massive. That's like a 40% damage decrease. I think in some cases Fade Bolt level 1 might be better. The only downside obviously is then that you can't use Telekinesis to set up a stun, so it's kind of bad. In a lot of cases Telekinesis is the better move because you're usually initiating on Rubik, but I kind of like the idea of getting Fade Bolt level 1. This has nothing to do with that, but it was just something I thought about the other day. I was like, wow, that actually reduces damage so much. Should almost always start the fight with Fade Bolt if you can bounce it on all heroes, pretty much. No Field got buffed at level 1. This is pretty big, so it might be worth it to get a single point at 4. If they have a lot of nukes, or hey, if they have some nukes, No Field is worth getting at 4 now. Otherwise, you'll still go 2 lift, 2 Fade Bolt, but squeezing in there at 4 at the sacrifice of a lift is possibly worth it, because the lift doesn't scale very well. Cast range increases slightly, and the lift duration goes up by 0.25, as does the stun duration. So skilling this point up is leveling this skill up is actually not very good. Whereas a single no field might be worth snagging, because now it gives you like almost half of the total value of the skill by getting 1 skill point. And it also does a little bit better with each skill point, an extra. Oh, it actually scales worse with levels, but it ends up with a max of 22 more, because you get 4 instead of 5. So with 3 skill points, it's better. 4 skill points, it's better. It's better at all levels, really. There's no point not to get it. It doesn't decrease your desire to skill point it. It just looks like it, because I'm seeing 14 and 15 here. But good to squeeze 1 point in early now, I think, in almost all cases. If you're against a Bat Rider or something like that, it might be worth it. With that said, it's probably not that much damage reduction. The way that you calculate this, it's something like you don't add them up together. It's like diminishing. So you do like 100 damage times 0.75 times 0.9. So it doesn't actually... It's like marginally less damage. So I think this is the survivability against magic with 1 skill point. So it's like 67.5, which is only a difference of 7.5% basically, which is not much. So if I'm talking 100 magic damage, and you're multiplying it by, you're reducing it by 7.5, you're talking 0.075. So you're reducing the damage by 7.5 if you're taking 100. It's not that much. It's really not that much. It might be worth it to get stats. If you're talking about you versus a single hero, it's quite possibly better to get stats. But if you're talking about 500 magic damage, that's 75 HP. Then it's way better. So I guess if you're against like a Lina or a Bat Rider, it's probably worth getting, because you're talking your whole HP pool and he's doing almost all magic damage. It's worth it. But against other heroes that are doing components of both, it might not be worth it. Well, honestly, 10% is so good. I think that's pretty justified. It's almost a cloak. This is going to make Rubik a lot better, I think, in the laning stage, by far. Actually, don't want to calculate open. Turn rates increase a little bit too. Pretty decent nerf to him, because normally he wants to turn around and steal spells. Sand King's Sandstorm max channel time rescaled to 50 at all levels, which I think is fine. Pretty big buff to early game Sand King, and no way nerf to late game Sand King, because you're never going to channel at 60 or 80 seconds anyways. So this was a nice feature of life change, good buff to early game Sand King. You can just hide in Sandstorm all the time now. Shadow Demon Disruption Illusion damage is increased in the late game, 75%. Keep in mind those last for 12 seconds right now, so you can use this to go high ground pretty easily. Last 12 seconds out of 16, I believe, which is quite a lot. Yeah, 12 seconds out of 16 late game. 75% illusion damage is massive. So if you make illusions of somebody and they're mostly an agility hero, they do way more damage to themselves than they do to you. Soulcatcher cooldown reduced to 10 seconds scaling. I kind of like that they're going this way in Shadow Demon, because Shadow Poison is already really good. I think buffing it more can make the hero crazy. But this gives you more options for disruption other than just saving an ally. You can actually spawn illusions from an ally to hit a tower. 12 seconds is enough where that's pretty worth it. But the problem is you don't usually max out disruption pretty early, and this doesn't really get good until your allies get a lot of items. So if you're playing against like a Morphling or something, Shadow Demon's going to be really good now. So those illusions you're making are hitting for a stupid amount of damage. SD is still very good against Spec as well, but I don't think this is going to make the difference, personally. Shadow Fiend, Requiem Souls, I didn't understand much of these. The damage line's travel distance rescaled, so they're the same at all levels. That's how far your ultimate goes on the map. The starting width has been increased all levels. I don't know what this means either. I'm guessing it means you can be standing next to somebody with a level 1 Requiem and it still does a lot of damage. I'm guessing that's what that means, because like if you ulti right on top of them, all the souls hit, but if you're kind of close, it doesn't do nearly as much damage. So I'm guessing this means that you can do a lot more damage close range with a Requiem of Souls. It probably is a big buff to level 1 SF ulti. I think that's what it does. Pretty sure. Big buff to level 1. Because honestly, that's what it feels like. Level 1 ulti sucks unless you're right on top of them. Now I think it's going to do a lot more. It may be the reason that normally when you ulti next to somebody at like level 16, that it seems like it does a lot more damage comparatively than a level 1 does. By far. I think it's this. So I'm sure they did some math on this. This may seem small, but I'm sure they did some math on this and realized like, oh, this is a good way to fix it without buffing it ridiculously out of power at 16. So Requiem of Souls and with rescaled as well, just to be about even. I don't think this matters that much. It just means that slightly better at level 6 or a level 1 ulti, and at late level ulti it's slightly worse when they're far away from you, but I think that's fine. Scepter now increases Necromancy max souls to 46. This is a difference of 10 souls, which is a difference of 20 damage. Keep in mind the way SF ulti works is it comes back after he ults and he heals from it, I believe. The eggs is still not justified if you have an alchemist. It's kind of cool. Scepter damage on return, and it does 40% of that. It does increase the total damage your ult does by quite a bit, 5 times 160. So that's kind of cool. So it's increasing your damage by 40% just from the return, but it's also increasing the amount of souls you have by about 33%. Whatever 5 divided by 18 is. So it's a 27% damage increase because you're getting more max souls. And that also gets increased by 40%. So if the previous one increased your damage by 140, the previous AGs, now we're doing 127% times 1.4. So our net increase is 177, almost 180% increase here. It's a pretty big increase. And the reason that it's more than that is because you're already increasing it by 40, which means that a further increase from the start is further increasing that increase. So it's about 180%. You're about doubling the damage that your ultimate does, assuming they're in melee range on you. That's a huge increase. This could actually be viable for team fights, because SF already builds tanky anyway, so if you substitute something like Ags instead of S and Y, it could be good. Again, you still have to get the ulti off, but I think this is in a realm where it could be a possible item. And again, we're not going to see people build this unless they try it out in games and say like, oh, this is actually really good. So we'll see. This could be good. At minimum, at far away, keep in mind that like range thing that they did is going to adjust everything. The end width, the starting width, for example. End width is a little bit worse. You're still going to do damage from range. It's going to be a little bit more than before. This could be viable, honestly. This could be viable. I honestly think this could be viable. Once I did the percentage increase, that's massive. Not to mention that you just get flat plus 20 damage, which isn't terrible. So you're buying Ags, you're getting 10 damage, you're getting plus another 20. You're getting 30 damage out of your Ags. That's not terrible. It's not terrible. Plus the survivability gives you way more mana than you need. Gives you more int than you need. The int components are wasted, the mana components are kind of wasted. So maybe you could get Ags instead of S and Y. But even that is a little iffy. It makes you a good teamfight hero, though. Makes you a really good teamfight hero. If you get a good ult off, if you go like Blink Ags or something, you could just win every teamfight, honestly. It would do so much damage. I think this is potentially viable. We'll see if there's some cool builds that work out with it. But I don't undercut this. I think this is really potentially good once you do the math. Alright, Shadow Shaman. Massive Reward Splash mechanics reworked. Now do a 75% splash and 175 AoE. Previous was this. 100% splash in a very short radius, and 175 radius, which previously was pretty big. That was about the max radius. It's going to be a lot better for splash damage. Keep in mind, Mass Serpent Wards do piercing, so they do 50 to heroes, and now they do 50 to Roche, so they're way worse against Roche. But they do way more AoE damage now, so they're very good at counter pushing. They were very good at counter pushing before, but now they're really good at counter pushing. Also, it doesn't do this like scaling splash thing. It just does 75 across the board, which is very, very good. Against creeps, this is going to wreck. Splash, by the way, is reduced by armor. It's the one cleave type that's reduced by armor. The only other thing that does splash, I think, is Dragonite ulti does splash. So it's cleave that's reduced by armor. It's not pure damage. So this is going to do really good creep damage now. Better creep damage than before. It's going to seem more even, not just like the ones that got hit, got killed. The other ones take a tiny bit of damage. Everything's going to take a pretty good amount of damage. So very good at counter pushing and dealing damage to creeps. And it's going to do a little bit. This might be pretty big actually. This is actually a pretty big buff to Shadow Shaman. So it nerfs him versus Roche by a lot, because it used to do 3 times damage. Now it's going to be a lot better against heroes that are grouped up. A lot better, especially if you get Ags. Last word no longer slows. That was your third skill. Arcane Curse base duration reduced from 7 to 6. It now slows movement speed by up to 18%. This is huge, I think. The cooldowns also increased to make the skill a little bit worse. And Glaives of Wisdom damage rescaled to be a little bit worse. So Glaives are a little bit worse. Arcane Curse is way better. And Last Word no longer slows. I think this alone is going to make Silencer potentially really potential as a support. He's much better at team fights than he was before. He was already good at team fights. Keep in mind this only did damage before. Now, so the way it works is it lasts for 6 seconds. If they cast a spell, it gets more duration added to it, which is pretty big. But now it provides a weak slow. and that's not bad, because if it just lasts the whole team fight, like, there's a lot of heroes that just have to cast spells, right? It lasts for 6 seconds, it's got a big radius, the mana cost is not bad. If you force a team fight and you cast this on like 4 people and they're just slowed by 18% for the whole fight, that's completely worth it. It's really nice to have. I would argue that, especially with this not slowing anymore, I would argue that you would just go a 4-1-1 build consistently on this hero. Does 35 damage a second. Oh, the penalty is 4 seconds. So if they cast any spell for 6 seconds, they get 10 seconds, which makes it a 350 damage nuke, and slows for 18% for 10 seconds. That's really good. I genuinely think you can do a 4-1-1 build. You can still zone with Glaives. Did they nerf the level 1? No, it's actually better at level 1 now. It's just worse at 3 and 4. And Last Word now does not slow, but it does silence. So this skill is only good leveling up for the cooldown reduction mostly. The damage is really not that worth talking about. You'd still probably go a 4-1-4 build. But I really like the Arcane Curse change. It makes the hero more viable. You have a slow that isn't based on Last Word, and it's AoE, instead of you just doing AoE damage. I really like this change. I think Silencer is close to being viable in a lot of different situations now. Also, you can AoE slow a push as well. That part's pretty cool. It's quite good, pretty good skill against creeps, because it lasts for 6 seconds and does 35 damage, which I believe is like 240 or something like that. Creeps don't cast spells, obviously, but the fact that you can slow them for 6 seconds as well is really nice. This is a huge, huge buff to Silencer, I think. It'd be really good against Meepo, I think, too, relatively. Skywrath Mage, Mystic Flare, Scepter duration increased from 2.4 to 12 seconds. And the cooldown has changed, so you can't just like infinitely cast them at level 3. I was thinking about doing like a Skywrath Mage OD strat. Doesn't really work anymore. It's more like it would be a Skywrath Mage plus a Mega Stunner strat, really. So if you get Ags now, it does the same DPS, so technically you could do 5 times the damage with Mystic Flare. If somebody stands in place, it would do 5 times the damage. It still goes out over 12 seconds, so it's kind of weird, but I was trying to think heroes you could combo this with, basically really high duration stuns. So Chronosphere is one example, but it would still only do about 2 times the total damage, because Sky himself, it'd be really good with Ensnare actually. You can maybe do that. Ensnare with it. That would be great. Any other like long duration Immobilize. Things that don't do damage would be the best combo. Veno ulti maybe. Sprout would be really good. Nature's Prophet, Skywrath Mage would be not bad. You could transition to an Eggs on support Sky, maybe. But it's kind of bad before you get it, but it does give you some armor. It kind of gives you everything you need. Sky with Eggs is not bad. I actually kind of like it now. But I really like it with Sprout. I think Sprout with it would be solid. A couple other stuns. Not that much, really. I mean, it's kind of hard to find super long duration stuns. Shackles, I guess. Shadow Shaman Sky could work. You could ulti somebody for like twice the damage. I kind of like the idea. It's a cool change. I think it makes the Eggs better. The only way that the Eggs worked before is if you were playing Ultra Carry Skywrath Mage, or if you're with an OD. It was the only way that the build worked, which is way too limited. This lets you buy it pretty much on any support hero, any role. You could justify this if you had a really good disable. Only downside is you can't get like a hard stun on Sky, unless you get like a Abyssal. So it's a little combo based. Shrapnel damage increase for Sniper, I think that's fine. Spectral Dagger slow no longer goes through spell immunity, which is good. Haunt cooldown is increased, so it's worse at level 1, which I think is needed, because he could gank too often early before. That's how he would get ahead. Haunt Illusion is no longer unstunnable, which is good. I found this out recently watching a game that I saw Illusion get stunned, but it still kept attacking. I was really confused. You could sleep them with like Naga or Elder Titan, so it's kind of an Elder Titan nerf in a way. At least any utility possibility, but kind of needed to be like this in my opinion. So a lot of heroes are more survivable, like Witch Doctor, for example, can just paralyzing cast the Haunt when the Spectre's out of position, because then it's going to bounce around and just stun illusions. That's good. He also got a big agility gain nerf, so way better as way worse as a carry versus a carry. This is a pretty big agi nerf actually. 0.4 over 10 levels. It's going to translate mostly to armor. The damage isn't that big of a deal, but the armor is going to matter, and also attack speed reduction towards illusions. So this is potentially a really big nerf. Storm Spirit Scepter causes Electric Vortex to be a 475 AoE ability around your hero, and it requires vision over them to affect them, so that if they're invis, you don't hit them. I think this is kind of cool. Blitz said it's awful. I'm not entirely sold. It's awful in the way that people normally play Storm, because normally people play Storm as a hard carry. Like they accelerate and they accelerate and they accelerate to play carry. But now you could hypothetically play Storm Spirit as an initiator, space creator. Is that ridiculous to say? Keep in mind that if they're Vortex, they're pulled towards him, so he's more likely to do more damage from Remnant and his stun. But just the idea that you can instantly position yourself in an enemy team, which you can because you're Storm Spirit, you can jump anywhere, and then stun them afterwards. Now, we might even see like some crazy bullshit Storm builds, like because you're basically ravaging, right? It's a 2.5 second stun. This is a Ravage. You're basically buying Ags on Storm, and you're getting a Ravage. It's a 2.5 second disable, 18 second cooldown, which is long, but you could get a Refresher, and you could literally instantly initiate on the enemy team and stun them. So this may change Storm's build a little bit. Oh, I didn't realize this build had a little Bloodstone there. It's actually kind of a cool set. I like little spikes. I mean, it's kind of... It looks cheesy. It doesn't match up with how you played Storm previously, but this opens up a potential other way to play Storm, and I think it's worth checking out. People will try it. You could get it late game if you're having team fight problems and your team is getting wrecked. You could combo this, man. It's a 2.5 second stun. That's a Ravage. It doesn't do damage, but it's a Ravage. That's extremely potentially game changing. I think this kind of thing needs to be looked into more. Oh, I thought of a cool combo for Skywrath Mage with AA, because the AA ice stun is like 3.5 seconds. That could be really good. AA Skywrath, is that a dual lane? Just like no disables. It's kind of weak against anything that's strong, but it'd be really good in lane. Really good in lane. Sky AA, damn. Alright, Sven, base movement speed decreased by 5. It's probably fine, because the hero was like strong, but didn't get picked at Manila at all. Terrorblade base armor increased by 3 again. Now the hero has like freaking 10 armor or something. He's probably got more armor than any other hero in the game at level 1. Oops, that's not what I wanted. And of course, it's not actually going to show his base armor, which is depressing. The one thing in-game Dota 2 is missing. Base armor increased by 3. I believe he has 10 armor now. It's either 9 or 10. So he's probably going to have the most armor in the game. Very good in a 1v1 physical trade. He would be good against Axe, but he's not good against Axe. Timbersaw Whirling Death debuff duration increase. This is the one that lowers your primary stat attribute. Very good against strength heroes. Reactive armor, regen, and armor stack increased as well. From 1 to that. So more levels you get of this, actually becomes pretty good. Tinker rearm goes down a bit. He can't refresh Pipe of Insight. The reason that they change this is because before you could... I'm pretty sure with this definitely says that multiple people can buy Pipe on your team now. Which is pretty crazy, actually. The idea of buying multiple pipes. Guess you can't go all int anymore. But I think they needed a good solution against Veil and the percentage-based spell cast. So if they have like a 5 int lineup, what they probably did is they probably did internal testing and they realized that teams could just go like 5 nukers and with a Veil, and there wasn't a good solution. So they said that they needed to be able to have the option to buy multiple pipes on the same team, so that if people went 5 nukes, that you could actually have a solution against it. Because at some point pipe stops, right? Because you can't cast it multiple times. So now you can stack pipes. That way if they go all into that, on buy these int items, then every person spends 3k on a pipe, and then all of a sudden that max int build doesn't work anymore. That's probably why they changed this. And therefore Tinker would be OP with it, because he could just refresh pipe, refresh pipe, refresh pipe. They had to change this. Base int increased slightly. Very small changes to the hero. This actually kind of adds up over time pretty heavily, especially at the level 1, because every time you rearm it's 25 mana, so it'll help, but I don't know if it'll make that big of a difference. Nature's Guy's radius is nerfed, and the Search Grace reduction reduced, so this is double nerf here for Nature's Guys, but it increases your movement speed by a lot now. This is kind of cool. 20% is really big. I like this. Leech Seed cooldown reduced a lot too, so encourages maxing it out. The skill is really good at level 4 now. Troll ranged whirling axes cooldown is better late game, which is fine, and Fervor max stacks goes up, so he's even better at single target. Tusk Walrus Kick cooldown reduced, and it does 350 damage on this. Is actually a really good nuke now. 350 on an 8-second cooldown is kind of incredible damage. That's like a level 4 Dagon or something. Well, cooldown wise it's pretty close to that, but damage wise it's not. But this is pretty cool. You could definitely justify Tusk buying this now if they're ahead, I think. Go like Blink Ags maybe. Or Shadow Blade Ags. I'm not sure, but it's a lot of damage. You could definitely do full combo, punch in the air, then kick them afterwards. Or punch to initiate, ice shards, kick them, snowball after them is probably what we'll see. That way, if you go high ground, for example, and they're all standing there, you could do the combo on one guy, ice shards, kick him, and snowball afterwards, and then he's separated from his team. It's basically like Bat Rider. And it's a lot more justified now because you're getting damage out of the item. So this is kind of where Wall's Kick had to go. It was bad for a long time, but you could definitely see it as a somewhat pickup by Tusk now. Tombstone, the same thing I was talking about. Tombstone and Netherward, it counts as illusions don't count as creeps anymore, so Tomb's better. Venge gets nerfed in terms of magic missile stun duration, which needed to happen because a lot of Venges were leaving stun at low amounts. They were playing Venge mostly as a aura, minus armor, and swap bot. But now, if you do that build, your stun duration is really weak. 1.2 is quite low. So this kind of needed to happen. This doesn't affect me that much because I usually get 2 to 3 levels of stun, in which case it's pretty much the same. But you should probably get 2 points in stun no matter what, I would say now. Because that stun duration is just so low. Unless you're just doing it to interrupt stuns. Poison attack, no longer an attack modifier. This is important because of lifesteal. You could definitely buy something like Mask of Madness on Viper now. I don't know if you'd want to, but you could buy Helm of the Dominator on Viper. It's going to really increase his survivability. When you're a tanky hero, getting lifesteal is potentially good. Probably still not worth it, but you could probably justify Helm of the Dominator mech treads on Viper now. You could have a creep to help push. I think that's definitely a possibility. Helm of the Dominator Viper could definitely be a possibility build now. You could also get Deso, I guess. Deso is going to be really good, actually. Deso Viper. Oh, because your second skill already does damage based on how low their HP is, and if you're multiplying that by minus armor as well. Viper Deso is definitely a possibility. That's a real ass possibility. You just be like a single target killer. This is a really big change for Deso. I think Deso is a real possibility. You go like mech treads 1 Deso. I like that actually. Good survivability, good tower sieging. I think Deso's a Viper core now. You take towers, you'd kill single targets better while still being really tanky. I really like that. It's a better way to damage transition than SNY. SNY is really good for all the stuff it does, but if you're just talking raw damage, Deso would be way better. I think Deso Viper is the thing now after Mech, definitely. Alright, Visage. Gravekeeper's Cloak recharge time reduced. The damage threshold is reduced massively. This is big because things like, I don't know, low levels Iron Shell would wreck it. There's a lot of things that would actually wreck it. But it's less wasted, easier. Stoneform delay stun is reduced as well because the familiars die faster now. You could kill them while they're transforming. Alright, Warlock got some pretty big buffs. His Shadow Word cast range increased from 500 to up to 750. I think this is a huge difference because it changes how Warlock will be effective in the late game. This is a lot of things. They're increasing cast ranges for late game supports a lot. They really needed to do this because people just didn't want to use those skills because they'd be out of position to heal an ally. But now, the animation is bad on Shadow Word, but now that it's a big cast range, and especially with Upheaval, for example, you don't really want to stand close to your allies. So pretty much always on Warlock, you're probably going to go Aether Lens, and now you can Shadow Word an ally or an enemy from up to 950 away. So you could be hiding in trees, Shadow Word your carry, without having to show yourself or come out of position, and then also channel Upheaval. Because a lot of times when you're channeling Upheaval, they run away from you, and eventually you try to catch up, but you're so far away that you can't heal anybody. So I think this is going to make Shadow Word a lot better. It's already a huge nuke. It lasts for 12 seconds. Stupid Windows. 12 seconds times 45. It does 540 magic damage. It's a huge nuke, and it's a fairly low cooldown, I believe. I think it's some. Or Shadow Word, depending. I kind of like 3 upheavals personally, but in the early game you could probably justify a 1-2-2 build because just having some Fatal Bonds is really good. He also got Fatal Bonds buff. The cooldown scales. So at level 4 it goes down to 18 seconds, which is kind of cool, I guess. Flaming Fist, this is big for the Golem. Changed from 40% chance for a bunch of damage to 100% chance. So what this means is he's got more Flaming Fist damage because if we do 0.4 times 80, we can calculate what the average is. It's 32. So his damage increased with the Flaming Fist. That does pure damage, by the way, in a big cleave. So it's better against heroes for sure, because usually only hit heroes like 2-3 times max. For clearing creeps, this one is still fine. In terms of late game, 0.4 times 150 does 60. So it does the same at level 3 Golem, but level 1 Golem is better. So level 1 Golem is buffed. It's better against heroes because you only hit heroes like once or twice usually. But overall, a Golem buff. And decent late game as well, just because it's reliable. Although this one you could potentially get lucky. You'd have peaks where you could just blow somebody up in like 2 seconds, but I like the consistency a little bit better. I think it's better for Golems. Golems are too hard to play against late game because sometimes they would just like quad cleave when you get Ag's Refresher and then everybody would die. It was kind of stupid. So I think this is a better way to play it. And I really like Warlock. I think he's potentially viable now. He still doesn't have a stun, but Upheaval is basically a stun if they're not moving, so I don't know. I potentially really like Warlock here. I might start picking it more in solo queue. Weaver time-lapse disjoints projectiles. That kind of needed to happen. The Scepter cooldown goes from 2016. Sorry for that noise. Somebody's doing yard work. But unfortunately, I've been recording for like 2 hours, if not longer. God, is this longer? This has been like 3 hours. I swear to God, this has been like 3 or 4 hours. Weaver now loses unit commission. Kind of irrelevant. Alright, Scepter to Winter Wyvern. Are we almost done? Oh, thank God we're almost done. Alright, Scepter to Wyvern. Causes Arctic Burn to be a toggle and drains 40 mana per second. Activation mana cost is the same as the current. So that's when you get an Ags, by the way. No longer has a limit on number of attacks per target. Now, I don't know exactly what this means. All right, I'm gonna pause and come back when it's done. Sorry, guys. Okay, happy to say all the bushes out in front of my house are now properly weed whacked. Okay, so I don't know what this means. Number of attacks per target. I'm guessing this means that you could hypothetically attack the same guy like 5 times with Arctic Burn and the damage would really add up, similar to Burning Spears. But keep in mind that it does do a percentage of max health, of current health. So if you hit if somebody has like 20% HP and you keep hitting them, it's not going to do much. But if somebody is really tanky and you get eggs on a Winter Wyvern and you keep attacking somebody, you're going to be able to apply like a lot of damage that's going to lower their HP very rapidly. So this could be good as a support Winter Wyvern. This could be a situational item if you're having trouble dealing with people that have a lot of single HP, like Centaur or a tanky Necrophos or a Death Prophet, for example. It would be quite good to get. But it does drain a lot of mana per second, 40 per second. It still costs 90 to turn it on. But the coolest part about this is that you could basically always fly over trees and cliffs and shit. So if you do get a really tanky build, if you go like Tranquils with God, what the heck is it called? Oh my God, this is bad. Tranquil Boots. God, I was saying Tranquils the whole time. That's why I was confused. Wow, Tranquil Soul Ring. I was trying to say Tranquils the whole time, but I was saying Tranquils first. I was like Soul Ring and... I was like Tranquils and... It's not Soul Ring. What is it? It's Tranquils. Okay. Tranquils, Soul Ring, Glimmer Cape, Force Staff, something like that into an Ags could potentially be really good. And keep in mind, you're constantly applying this on heroes. You do have quite a bit of mana on Winter Wyvern, so this could buy you a lot of time. Another thing that you could do that'd be really cool is you could ulti somebody, because keep in mind the ulti lasts for like 4 seconds or something like that. If you get some attack speed on the hero, you could ulti a group of people, and then you could turn the Arctic Burn on, and you could attack somebody important like 4 times in a row. Something like that. You could go like Tranquil's Soul Ring, Drum, Winter Wyvern, into an Ags. That's a possibility, because when you ulti them, they're not taking damage, but they're also not attacking you. But that's fine, because this does damage over time. You could attack somebody like 4 times or something during that ultimate, if your attack speed is decent, and then when it ends, then they're also going to take a ridiculous amount of damage from Arctic Burn. Like, a lot of damage. So something like that could be kind of cool. And you definitely will see some potentially carry Winter Wyverns now, but keep in mind, it's not good for closing out kills, it's just good for doing damage. So Arctic Burn could get a lot better here. And the movement speed slows 40% at level 4. That's actually quite good. I didn't realize it scaled so high. Quite good. So, that's kind of cool. Wraith King Mortal Strike now does a critical hit for double the value when attacking non-heroes. That's good. That's your third skill to crit. So you can, that means you're going to be able to Rosh much better with Wraith King. Big buff to Wraith King Rosh. For jungling, he's going to be way better. We could definitely see Wraith King doing some like fast laning build, like a 1-1-3 build into the jungle with a Mask of Madness, or you probably won't want to do Mask of Madness on Wraith King because his value is in his tankiness, so, and his respawn on top of that, so having Mask of Madness is probably not worth it. But you could definitely do a very fast Wraith King jungle build with this. You might even be able to jungle with him from the start, but his crit is actually quite awful in terms of percentage base. It's one of the worst, I believe. Where you at, Wraith King? You guys are probably standing there like, he's right there. Okay, I am over the limit of being allowed to look for heroes. Maybe it's because I'm looking for Skeleton King, not Wraith King. That's probably why. I'm like, where's the skeleton looking dude? He's all green and stuff. Yeah, the crit's pretty bad. It's a double. Okay, so it's up. You know what? This is not bad. It's awfully close to what Juggernaut does. Juggernaut does 15% for a 2 times crit. Now we're doing 15% for a 2 times crit at level 1. That's not terrible. So if we do the math on that, we're doing 0.15 times 200. What's our increase? No, that's wrong. It's basically 100 times 0.15. We're increasing our damage by 15% with the 1 skill point. The second skill point would then be 200. It would be double that, so it'd be 30%. So basically those numbers. 200, 300, 400, 500. Say 20% against creeps, multiplied by the 15, I guess. It's actually 15, 30, 45, and 60, right? Because it's basically 400 times 0.15. Yeah. So it's 15, 30, 45, and a 60% damage against creeps. That's a lot. Like, if you go anything other than a 114 build now on Wraith King, you're crazy. You're actually crazy. This is so good. This is so good for jungling. You're going to jungle really fast on this hero now. So almost always you'll probably see Wraith King into a jungle and then team fighting. Probably. But I think you can most likely get away with this. Maybe you'll go like 2-1-2 build for laning, so your laning is a bit better. But if you're free farm, you'll definitely max out Mortal Strike right away. And then probably Wraithfire or Vampiric, something after that. Really good change to Wraith King. Without making him OP against heroes, he can farm faster, which is one of the things he lacks against a lot of heroes, since he has no AoE. Alright, and the last change, Zeus static field reduced. Worse at level 1, worse at all levels actually. It no longer disables Blink Dagger. That really needed to happen. It was just too good. The range was so big that it would just catch people with blinks all the time. And Thunder God's Wrath damage has reduced. They actually nerfed Zeus all across the board. I'm a little surprised about this. Oh, I know why. They nerfed him across the board damage-wise because he can now build int items and do a stupid amount of damage. So they had to nerf his int. They had to nerf him because the game just became so good for him because of that percentage-based damage increase if you have int. His overall int gain, I'm not sure how good it is, but yeah, if they didn't nerf Zeus, he would have been the most OP hero of the patch, and he may still be very strong. And we can't see his stat gain. Fuck. If I demo the hero, we can see it. It's pretty fast to demo, so it's not a big deal. Tower protection 1. Alright, so my int gain is pretty good, 2.7. Let's level up to max. Got 85. I don't remember what I had before, but it's pretty good. It's like 60. My percentage damage increase is like, I don't know, I have like 100 int right now, so it's like 6% or something. It's better. I mean, that's gonna die no matter what. Oh, I just did 30 damage to that guy just from Mora. Yeah, it's pretty good. Alright, so that's the patch. As a whole, I honestly think the patch is not that ridiculous. It's pretty mild as a whole, and I'm glad they did that because the major qualifiers are coming up in like 2 days, so it would have been crazy to change everything. There's a lot of little changes, and there's a lot of things that are different. The biggest ones are the early game item builds, and obviously a lot of small hero changes, but mostly the biggest changes came down to carries, I think. A lot of supports were really not very different. Most supports were not very different, with the exception of maybe CM. She got 2 big buffs in the last 2 patches, I think. But most of these heroes are about the same. I think the cores are going to change for sure of this patch, with some exceptions. Enchantress is still going to be strong because they didn't nerf creeps or anything like that. So Enchantress is still going to be pretty strong. But defending, being dived at towers is going to be safer. All of these things are going to be better. Satyrs were nerfed. A lot of the other creeps were still about the same. So I'm looking forward to the patch. I'm going to go practice now. I got some stuff to grind. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my first/second impressions, and hope you learned a lot. Sorry it was so long, but that's why you guys watch me. So thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.